The ocean stretches endlessly, a vast expanse of shifting blues and greys, yet hidden within its calm and fury lie vessels that defy explanation. Some ships have returned from voyages fully intact, their sails set and hulls sound, yet every soul aboard has vanished without a trace. As you traverse these forgotten routes, you will encounter the Mary Celeste drifting silently near the Azores, the Resolven's empty decks slipping through Atlantic currents, and the enigmatic Baychimo trapped in Arctic ice for decades. Across oceans and decades, each case reveals a ship obedient to wind and sea but bereft of human presence, leaving behind only questions and the haunting persistence of absence. In the chapters ahead, the mysteries of these abandoned vessels unfold, inviting reflection on courage, choice, and the unfathomable nature of the sea. The Mary Celeste. The Atlantic appeared calm when the drifting vessel was first observed, its sails oddly set and its motion steady enough to suggest purpose rather than abandonment. No distress flags were raised, and no figures appeared along the deck despite clear visibility and manageable seas. When repeated signals went unanswered, suspicion replaced routine curiosity, though nothing outwardly suggested catastrophe. Boarding revealed an eerie stillness, as if ordinary maritime life had paused and never resumed. Equipment rested where it should have been, and the ship answered the wind as though still under command. Only after examining the stern did the identity of the vessel become clear, revealing the name Mary Celeste and marking the beginning of one of maritime history's most persistent mysteries. The ship itself was not unfamiliar with transatlantic trade or long ocean crossings. Launched in 1861 and later refitted after earlier ownership changes, the Mary Celeste had been carefully inspected before departing New York Harbor in November 1872. Her cargo consisted of 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, tightly packed in the hold and intended for delivery to Genoa. Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs, a conservative and deeply religious mariner, commanded the voyage. His reputation favoured caution over bravado, and his decision to bring his wife Sarah and their young daughter aboard further reinforced expectations of a stable and carefully managed crossing. The crew selected for the voyage was small but appropriate for a ship of her size and purpose. Each sailor possessed prior maritime experience, and no surviving records suggest disputes, disciplinary problems, or instability among them. Early progress across the Atlantic appeared unremarkable according to the surviving log entries. Weather conditions during the first phase of the journey were seasonally typical, offering no indication of violent storms or sudden danger. Briggs's navigation followed known routes, and nothing in the documentation hints at mechanical failure or illness. At every recorded stage, the voyage appeared ordinary, which makes the absence of any warning signs all the more unsettling. On December 5, 1872, the Canadian brigantine DEI Gracia encountered the drifting ship approximately 400 miles east of the Azores. Captain David Morehouse, who had previously known Briggs, noticed irregular sail handling that immediately raised concern. The vessel maintained forward motion, yet no one appeared to be guiding her. When a boarding party was sent across, they found the Mary Celeste afloat and structurally intact but completely deserted. The lifeboat was missing, navigational instruments were gone, and essential papers lay scattered rather than secured, suggesting interruption rather than theft, mutiny, or violence. Below deck, the scene grew more confusing rather than clarifying. Food and water supplies remained plentiful, personal belongings were neatly arranged, and clothing was stored as though the crew expected to return. Captain Briggs's personal effects were largely undisturbed, and his wife's possessions showed no signs of hurried packing. The galley showed evidence of recent use, yet no meals sat abandoned in panic. In the hold, approximately 3.5 feet of water had accumulated, a concerning but manageable amount for a wooden ship of that era. Importantly, the pumps were operational, indicating no immediate threat of sinking. Attention soon turned to the cargo itself. Several barrels of denatured alcohol were found empty, their seals compromised, though the majority remained intact and properly stowed. Alcohol vapor is volatile, and even the suspicion of fumes accumulating below deck could have raised fears of explosion aboard a confined wooden vessel. This detail has led historians to suggest that Briggs may have ordered a precautionary evacuation. However, no scorching, charring, or structural damage was found anywhere aboard the ship. What remains is evidence of concern without proof of catastrophe, leaving motive inferred rather than confirmed. The ship's log provides the last verified anchor time. The final entry, dated November 25, 1872, places the vessel near Santa Maria Island in the Azores under favourable sailing conditions. There is no mention of damage, illness, mutiny, or extreme weather, nor any suggestion that abandonment was being considered. The 10-day gap between that entry and the ship's discovery remains unexplained. During this period, the Mary Celeste drifted westward under wind and current alone, maintaining a course that preserved her condition while erasing all human presence. One of the most revealing absences was the ship's chronometer and sextant. These instruments were essential for navigation and would not have been removed casually. Their absence suggests Briggs believed continued travel from the lifeboat would be necessary, perhaps to remain close to the ship or reach nearby land. Without precise navigation, however, even small separations become irreversible. This detail implies planning rather than panic, but it also reveals how fragile calculated decisions become once control is surrendered to the sea. When the Mary Celeste was brought to Gibraltar, official inquiries generated suspicion without resolution. Salvage rights became entangled in legal disputes, and the crew of the DEI Gratia faced insinuations despite the absence of evidence supporting foul play. The proceedings ultimately reduced salvage compensation without offering an explanation, leaving motives questioned and conclusions withheld. No bodies were ever recovered, no confirmed sightings of the missing crew appeared in port records, and no documentation emerged to suggest survival elsewhere, leaving the disappearance officially unresolved. As years passed, the case attracted exaggeration that obscured its most unsettling qualities. Sensational accounts introduced claims of blood stains, madness, and supernatural intervention, none supported by contemporary testimony. What remains verifiable instead is restraint. The ship was not looted, burned, or destroyed. She was abandoned in a manner suggesting deliberation rather than chaos, preparation rather than fear. That careful order, preserved in maritime records, deepens the mystery by denying historians the comfort of obvious failure or visible violence. What ultimately gives the Mary Celeste its enduring power is the contradiction preserved in detail. Ships lost to storms leave wreckage, and ships lost to violence leave evidence. But this vessel returned intact, navigable, and obedient to wind and sea. Her rigging held, her hull remained sound, and her cargo stayed largely secured, all signs of a ship capable of completing its voyage. Maritime history offers no parallel explanation that fully accounts for an experienced captain voluntarily abandoning such a vessel under fair conditions, leaving a mystery defined by absence rather than destruction. Whatever decision was made aboard the Mary Celeste occurred quietly, deliberately, and far enough from land that the sea ensured it would never be explained. The Resolven. Along the grey edge of the Nova Scotian coast, a small schooner was found drifting as if it had only just slipped its moorings, rather than been lost to the open Atlantic. She moved without urgency, answering wind and tide with calm indifference, and nothing in her posture suggested distress. No figures appeared on deck, and no signals broke the stillness despite the vessel's proximity to land. When local mariners approached, the silence felt recent, almost temporary. Only after boarding did the name Resolven become clear, tying the unease of the moment to a ship whose disappearance would prove impossible to reconstruct. Built for routine coastal work, the Resolven was not intended for long, hazardous passages or speculative voyages into dangerous waters. As a British schooner operating in the 19th century, her trade followed familiar routes, and her movements were shaped by predictability rather than risk. Vessels of her kind relied on practical seamanship and short, regular journeys between ports, where delays were noticed quickly and absences rarely went unexplained. Nothing about the Resolven's design or function suggested exposure to extraordinary danger, which makes her abandonment unsettling in a quieter way, as though something interrupted a task meant to end normally. When the first men stepped aboard, the deck offered no immediate clues of alarm or struggle. Lines were not hastily cut, fittings remained intact, and nothing appeared displaced by force or panic. The ship seemed paused rather than deserted, as though the crew had stepped away with the expectation of returning shortly. There were no signs of violence, and no damage to suggest a collision or grounding. The wheel stood unattended, but not locked or disabled, reinforcing the impression that command had not been violently removed, only inexplicably abandoned within sight of familiar shores. Within the ship's lower decks, the sense of interruption deepened. Personal effects remained where they had been left, without the disorder that accompanies haste. Sleeping arrangements suggested recent use, yet no one had prepared the space for a prolonged absence. Food stores were present and undisturbed, and the galley showed no evidence of a rushed or chaotic departure. These details did not explain, only contradict. A ship prepared for work but missing its workers created an atmosphere of unfinished intention, as though time itself had stalled between routine labour and an event that never fully revealed itself. Weather conditions offered little help in understanding the abandonment. Contemporary records indicate no severe storms in the area at the time, and sea conditions were within the limits expected for coastal sailing. Wind and tide behaved predictably, removing natural disaster from the list of likely causes. The absence of damage to the hull or rigging further undermined theories of sudden environmental threat. Without weather to blame, attention returned to human decision-making, which appeared increasingly difficult to justify given the manageable conditions and the vessel's closeness to land. Certain absences became more troubling than what remained behind. Essential items were missing, though not in a way that clearly defined intention. If a small boat was used, its departure left no witnesses, and its destination was never recorded. Navigational choices could not be reconstructed with confidence, and no signals suggested an emergency evacuation. These missing elements suggested movement rather than disappearance, but movement without direction. Each absence hinted at decision-making, yet none clarified whether those decisions were cautious, mistaken, or compelled by circumstances now erased. What unsettled later investigators was how compressed the timeline appeared to be. The Resolven had not been adrift long, and the freshness of the scene suggested a narrow window between ordinary operation and total abandonment. This short span leaves little room for elaborate theories or prolonged crises. Whatever occurred seems to have unfolded quickly enough to prevent outside notice, yet slowly enough to leave the ship orderly. That balance of speed and restraint complicates every attempt to impose narrative logic on the event. Official records show that the schooner was subjected to standard maritime inquiry procedures once brought under control, yet those proceedings produced little beyond administrative closure. With no evidence of foul play, insurers struggled to determine liability, and salvage considerations raised uncomfortable questions about responsibility without wrongdoing. The absence of witnesses or material damage left authorities unable to assign cause, and the case quietly receded from formal review. Unlike disasters that provoke reform or regulation, the Resolven generated no changes in practice. Its mystery deemed unresolvable within existing frameworks, and thus set aside rather than answered. Early explanations emerged as they often do in maritime mysteries, shaped by assumption rather than evidence. Some suggested sudden fear, others accidental separation, but none accounted fully for the condition of the vessel or the lack of signals. Without testimony from the crew or physical damage to analyse, speculation filled the silence left by facts. Each proposed explanation explained part of the scene while contradicting another, leaving investigators with fragments that refused to align into a coherent account. Silence itself became one of the most troubling features of the case. No distress calls were reported, and no nearby vessels recalled unusual activity. In an area frequented by maritime traffic, this absence of observation defied expectation. A crew leaving a functional ship near land should have left some trace of communication or contact, yet none surfaced. The sea offered no bodies, the coast produced no survivors, and records yielded no answers, deepening the sense that the disappearance occurred just outside the reach of witness. Other abandoned ships would later draw wider attention, often because of the distance or dramatic circumstance. The Resolven remains distinct because of proximity rather than isolation. She did not vanish into a remote expanse, but lingered close enough to suggest rescue was possible. That closeness transforms the mystery, shifting it from survival against nature to a failure of explanation within reach of help. The unanswered question is not how far the crew travelled, but why they left at all. The case ultimately resists conclusion because it lacks a final act. No wreckage followed, no aftermath unfolded, and no decisive error revealed itself in hindsight. The Resolven remains suspended in an unfinished moment, defined by a ship that continued without those who guided it. In maritime history, where loss is often dramatic and final, This quiet pause stands apart, offering only the certainty that something interrupted the ordinary and then withdrew without leaving a reason behind. The Resolven did not disappear into distance or disaster, but stopped just close enough to land to leave its unanswered silence behind. The Kaz II. A catamaran sat anchored unexpectedly in the Tasman Strait, its sails furled and cockpit empty, bearing the name Kaz II, a vessel poised for a journey yet abandoned without a trace. Observers immediately noted the calmness of the scene. Engine systems were running, navigation instruments engaged, and deck lines were properly set. Nothing suggested haste or struggle, yet no human figures were present. Small items such as charts and sunglasses remained where they had been left, untouched. The incongruity between operational readiness and total absence created an unsettling impression, as if a functioning crew had simply evaporated while the vessel maintained its course along familiar waters. Outfitted for recreational sailing along Australia's eastern coast, the Kaz II was a modern catamaran, designed to accommodate a small crew comfortably and safely. Navigation electronics, safety equipment, and sleeping quarters were all in working order, reflecting careful maintenance and attention. The vessel's design and outfitting implied routine voyages, not hazardous exploration, with redundancy in propulsion and emergency systems. Its modest size and advanced instrumentation meant that even a brief absence of crew should have triggered alarms, yet the boat remained at full readiness. The contrast between technological preparedness and human disappearance intensified the sense of mystery, highlighting that nothing about the ship suggested abandonment was warranted. Stepping aboard, investigators immediately noted the absence of human activity. Personal items, neatly arranged charts, and stowed supplies indicated that the crew had left deliberately or had been interrupted. Meals had not been consumed, and no clothing or personal effects were scattered in haste. The cockpit instruments displayed normal readings, and all operational systems functioned without error. Even small details such as towels hung to dry and neatly coiled ropes suggested routine life rather than disruption. The scene conveyed preparation and organisation, leaving observers to question how an entire crew could vanish from a fully equipped modern vessel with no signs of struggle or explanation evident anywhere on board. Electronic logs and GPS devices offered another layer of evidence. Recent routes indicated intentional navigation, with steering adjustments and speed changes consistent with normal operation. Engine and battery readings confirmed active management until the moment the crew disappeared. Yet, there were gaps in recorded observations. Instruments noted positional changes, but no explanation for the sudden cessation of human involvement. Even sophisticated technology could not reconstruct the moment of vanishing. Investigators could track the vessel's path, but not the choices that led to abandonment. This juxtaposition of precision and absence added an unsettling dimension, demonstrating that advanced maritime tools could document activity without ever explaining it. Inside the cabins, neatly stored provisions, untouched personal effects, and ready-to-use equipment reinforced the notion of sudden absence. Clothing remained folded, bedding arranged, and food supplies secured for ongoing travel. Cups and water bottles suggested recent activity, yet no one had returned to complete ordinary tasks. Small details, like a journal left open or a pair of shoes placed near a hatch, create a sense of incompletion, as though daily life had simply paused. These observations emphasized a critical contrast. The Kaz II was fully equipped, organized, and operational, yet the human element, the very crew it depended on, had inexplicably vanished into nothingness. Environmental factors provided little explanation. Weather reports and oceanographic data confirmed calm seas, gentle winds, and no sudden tidal events during the period surrounding discovery. Visibility was clear, and nothing in local conditions indicated immediate danger to a vessel of the catamaran's capabilities. The absence of storm or hazard removed conventional maritime threats from consideration, leaving the abandonment unexplained. Modern vessels like the Kaz II are designed to withstand minor environmental disruptions without distress, and the surrounding calm further reinforced the contradiction. A fully functional vessel, safe conditions, yet no crew remained to operate it. Some safety equipment, however, was missing or displaced. Life jackets and the small inflatable dinghy were unaccounted for, but there was no indication of emergency deployment. Nothing suggested a rushed evacuation, and the absence of these items created ambiguity rather than clarity. Investigators could not determine whether the crew left voluntarily or if circumstances compelled them to take the small boat, leaving behind the primary vessel. The combination of intact systems and missing emergency tools added a technical layer to the mystery, highlighting how ordinary safety measures failed to explain the disappearance and suggesting human decisions or events that left no trace behind. Authorities quickly responded, documenting the vessel's condition, collecting electronic data, and interviewing family and associates of the missing crew. Every procedural step emphasized thorough examination, yet even modern investigative resources encountered limits when faced with such a total absence. Interviews did not explain, and satellite records offered no further insight into the crew's fate. The meticulous investigation revealed only the boat itself, operational, orderly, and entirely devoid of occupants. Contemporary methods, from forensic examination to navigational analysis, could account for technical operation but not human behaviour, leaving the event suspended in uncertainty despite exhaustive inquiry. Maritime experts suggested a range of hypotheses, each constrained by the peculiar circumstances. Accidental falls overboard, sudden illness, or voluntary departure were all considered, but none accounted for the consistent order of personal belongings, fully operational systems, and functioning instruments. Theories were informed by evidence, yet each encountered contradictions when weighed against the vessel's intact and ready state. Even with modern investigative tools, logical explanations were limited, emphasizing that the mystery was not one of dramatic disaster, but of an absence that defied conventional reasoning and left normal operational indicators intact. Public attention and media coverage amplified the peculiarity of the disappearance. News outlets highlighted the strange combination of technological readiness and total human absence, juxtaposing ordinary life with extraordinary circumstance. Social and cultural narratives framed the vessel as a ghostly anomaly of the modern age, with curiosity fueled by the contrast between a fully operational contemporary catamaran and the complete absence of its crew. Yet all reporting, while vivid in description, remained grounded in the factual anomaly, a functioning vessel in every sense, yet devoid of human presence and untouched by known hazards or misfortune. Months of investigation confirmed that the Kaz II remained entirely intact, its operational systems fully functional and decks orderly. The catamaran's readiness underscored the absence of crew as the only unresolved variable, with no additional evidence emerging to clarify the disappearance. The case differed from historic maritime mysteries by occurring in an era of technology, recording devices, and rapid communication, yet these advantages provided no answers, only detailed documentation of a vessel behaving as it should, while human presence, the fundamental element of maritime operation, had vanished entirely. The incident continues to challenge assumptions about risk, behaviour, and causality in modern sailing. Despite sophisticated navigation, emergency systems, and proximity to observation, the disappearance remains unexplained. Investigators and maritime analysts have examined every technical detail, yet the event resists resolution, leaving the Kaz II suspended in a state of operational normality paired with human absence. Its mystery is less about natural hazard and more about the inexplicable gap between a functioning vessel and the missing crew it was designed to carry. The Kaz II waited silently, fully prepared for a voyage no one remained to complete. The Carroll A. Deering. The five-masted schooner Carroll A. Deering appeared near Diamond Shoals, fully rigged and afloat yet utterly devoid of crew, a commercial vessel whose disappearance immediately challenged the expectations of maritime order. Observers noted that sails were properly set, decks were orderly, and lines were secured, all suggesting routine operation. Personal items remained in cabins, neatly arranged as though daily tasks had been abruptly paused. There were no signs of struggle, collision, or fire, and the cargo remained undisturbed. The contrast between a vessel fully prepared for trade and the total absence of human presence created an immediate sense of unease. Launched for cargo transport along the Atlantic coast, the Carroll A. Deering carried goods on scheduled routes, her design and capacity reflecting both industrial ambition and routine maritime commerce during the early 1920s. She had been built for efficiency and speed, capable of navigating both shallow coastal waters and open sea. Her 5 masts allowed for substantial sail power, enabling predictable schedules that ports depended upon. The schooner's routine journeys were well documented, making her disappearance even more striking. A vessel accustomed to precise coordination and adherence to shipping schedules had vanished in the midst of operational normalcy. Manned by experienced sailors and officers accustomed to coastal trading, the crew had been considered reliable, with a voyage itinerary that offered little risk and predictable port arrivals along North Carolina and New England harbors. Reports indicated that the officers and crew were familiar with the shoals, currents, and weather patterns along their route. Their departure from the port of origin had followed standard procedures, and inspections confirmed that the vessel was seaworthy. These factors highlighted the abnormality of the situation. Trained mariners operating a well-maintained schooner should have faced no extraordinary challenges, making their disappearance all the more baffling to authorities and maritime historians alike. When investigators boarded, the decks and cabins revealed ordinary life paused, neatly stowed cargo, unbroken supplies, and personal effects in place, as if every hand had vanished mid-task without warning or reason. Meal preparations had been left in order, tools and navigational instruments rested where they were last used, and personal belongings such as clothing and journals showed no signs of disturbance. The galley was intact, and the sleeping quarters displayed no evidence of sudden evacuation. These details suggested that departure was neither hurried nor panic-driven, deepening the mystery of a vessel fully capable of completing its voyage without any crew remaining aboard. The schooner's hull, rigging and sails remained intact, showing no evidence of collision or mechanical failure, while cargo remained undisturbed, emphasizing that the vessel was fully capable of completing its intended voyage. Inspectors noted that the masts were sound, the deck fittings secure, and ropes properly coiled, indicating that routine maintenance and preparation had been performed correctly. Even the anchor and bilge systems were functional. Such meticulous order reinforced the central enigma: a vessel operating in standard condition, prepared for transit, and fully functional had become a ghost ship, with no humans left to steer, manage, or maintain her course. Local weather and tidal records confirmed clear conditions at the time of discovery, ruling out storms or environmental hazards, and underscoring the puzzling nature of a disappearance occurring along a heavily trafficked coastal corridor. Wind patterns were moderate, currents predictable, and visibility excellent. There were no reports of sudden squalls, rogue waves, or unusual tidal surges. The North Carolina coastline was closely monitored by shipping traffic, yet no vessels reported collisions or incidents involving the Carroll A. Deering. Environmental factors, which often explain maritime disappearances, provided no answers, leaving investigators to focus on human and procedural anomalies instead of natural causes. Port records and shipping communications noted the vessel's departure and anticipated arrival, creating a sharp contrast between official expectations and the complete absence of any crew upon boarding, leaving authorities with only routine documentation and unresolved questions. Scheduled arrivals were recorded, cargo manifests confirmed shipment details, and logs showed no anomalies at departure. Telegraphs and correspondence with nearby ports failed to indicate delays or emergencies. These records highlighted the discrepancy between the administrative certainty of maritime trade and the physical reality of a ship adrift without personnel. The meticulous bureaucracy underscored the anomaly. Nothing in the paperwork suggested that abandonment or misfortune had occurred. Salvage crews and investigators reported minimal anomalies: a missing lifeboat, operational navigation instruments, and orderly decks, all pointing to abandonment without visible struggle or damage, a mystery compounded by procedural thoroughness and formal inspection. Standard salvage procedures were followed, yet nothing was discovered that explained the crew's absence. Instruments remained functional, and the ship's log did not indicate distress or unusual events. The missing lifeboat added only another layer of uncertainty. It suggested a potential voluntary departure, yet no trace of the crew was ever recovered. Every detail seemed to confirm that the vessel itself remained capable of sailing, yet entirely devoid of life. Maritime analysts proposed several possibilities, ranging from mutiny and piracy to navigational errors, yet no single theory reconciled the vessel's operational condition with the total disappearance of its crew, leaving only conjecture supported by circumstantial evidence. Piracy was discounted due to lack of theft or disturbance. Mutiny theories conflicted with the preserved personal belongings and intact cargo. Navigational hazards could not account for the orderly state of the vessel. Even experts agreed that the case resisted conventional explanation, leaving the schooner as an enduring anomaly within shipping records. Every plausible theory clashed with the evidence, emphasizing absence as the central unresolved factor. The disappearance of the Caroline Deering quickly entered maritime history, capturing attention in newspapers and port communities, becoming emblematic of unexplained vanishings where routine commerce collided with inexplicable absence. Reports focused on the schooner's operational condition, its 5 masts, and the thoroughness of the crew's preparations, yet failed to uncover any trace of human life. Public fascination grew as the story was repeated, often emphasizing the contrast between orderly cargo and vanished sailors. Over time, the vessel became a symbol of maritime mystery, illustrating how normalcy in trade could conceal an entirely unexplainable human disappearance. Despite extensive investigation and public scrutiny, the schooner's disappearance remains unresolved, a case defined less by wreckage or calamity than by the stark contrast between a functioning vessel and the vanished humans it had been entrusted to carry. Records, witness accounts, and official reports preserved details of the ship's condition, but offered no insight into the crew's fate. Modern historians still debate plausible scenarios, yet the core enigma persists: a fully maintained vessel, a routine voyage, and an inexplicable absence of those charged with navigating her. The Carol A. Deering remains a maritime ghost, frozen in time by its own contradiction. The Carol A. Deering drifted along the Atlantic coast, carrying a silence heavier than the cargo it was meant to deliver. The Joyita. The crew of the Joyita vanished while routine maintenance and daily tasks continued, leaving a vessel seemingly alive yet entirely without human presence. When discovered, cabins contained personal effects untouched, meals partially consumed, and navigational charts open on tables as if waiting for consultation. The galley bore signs of preparation interrupted mid-task, while instruments rested where they had last been used. The decks were orderly, sails properly set and ropes coiled, yet no sound of human life persisted. Investigators confronted an unsettling contradiction: a vessel equipped and operational, yet abandoned, defying immediate explanation and inviting speculation on the events that led to this absence. Originally crafted as a luxury yacht and later retrofitted for passenger and cargo transport, the Joyita's design reflected both comfort and operational resilience. The wooden hull had been strengthened for ocean voyages, while cabins and deck structures accommodated both crew and passengers with careful attention to space and function. Modifications included additional lifeboats, reinforced radio communication, and fuel storage for extended trips. These enhancements suggested a vessel intended for both safety and efficiency, capable of navigating tropical waters with confidence. Her size, combined with structural integrity, made the disappearance of all aboard especially perplexing, as the ship was entirely capable of completing its intended route without incident. Among the few aboard were experienced sailors and staff accustomed to tropical voyages, whose expertise paradoxically highlighted the inexplicable nature of their disappearance. Captains and mates were trained to monitor weather, navigation, and mechanical systems simultaneously, while deckhands managed sails and rigging under standard procedures. Passengers were familiar with shipboard routines and expectations for tropical crossings. Their combined experience made negligence unlikely, yet the absence of any explanation or trace of the crew accentuated the mystery. Each person on board had a reason to remain, whether safety, duty, or survival, making the sudden disappearance all the more confounding for both authorities and maritime historians. Inside the cabins, personal effects remained undisturbed, food partially consumed, and equipment carefully arranged, suggesting absence rather than hasty evacuation. Journals, clothing, and toiletries rested as they had been left, while small items such as books, pens, and charts appeared paused mid-use. In the galley, utensils lay as if waiting for the next meal, and provisions showed no signs of looting or spoilage. These details implied that the vessel's abandonment was neither violent nor panicked. Each room presented a tableau of daily routine frozen in time, reinforcing the sense of disappearance without struggle, and leaving observers questioning what circumstances could compel a fully prepared crew to vanish entirely. Water had intruded into certain compartments, and mechanical systems showed minor failure, creating a subtle chaos that contrasted with the order of personal belongings. Pumps had not kept pace with flooding, engines were left idle, and electrical systems failed in ways that suggested temporary oversight rather than catastrophic damage. Cargo and equipment were largely intact, yet small anomalies hinted at activity shortly before abandonment. Investigators noted that these irregularities might indicate an emergency, yet the absence of distress signals, fire, or structural compromise left only conjecture. The juxtaposition of functional vessels and minor failures against a vanished crew intensified the sense of something inexplicably wrong aboard the Joyita. Temperature, humidity, and isolated currents complicated survival expectations, leaving investigators puzzled over how a fully functioning vessel could be abandoned in such conditions. Tropical heat would quickly accelerate dehydration, while oceanic currents could carry lifeboats far from the ship. Communication with nearby vessels was limited, reducing the chances of assistance if the crew had departed voluntarily. Yet the Joyita remained partially seaworthy, with sails capable of propulsion and navigation tools intact. This paradox suggested that the crew might have believed themselves imperiled or compelled to act suddenly, but the absence of any traceable decision-making left a void that modern analysis struggles to interpret. Inspection reports noted missing lifeboats, unpowered radios, and unsecured gear, yet no trace of the crew could be discovered, deepening the enigma. Investigators catalogued everything, from deck fittings to engine gauges, and attempted to reconstruct the sequence of events leading to abandonment. The lack of operational emergency signals complicated interpretation, as did the absence of clothing or personal flotation devices. While some items had been removed or displaced, no coherent pattern emerged to explain why the crew would leave or where they might have gone. Each detail seemed simultaneously ordinary and disturbing, reinforcing the sense that a logical explanation remained frustratingly out of reach. Mechanical and navigational anomalies, including engines left in neutral and erratic drift patterns, implied human error or oversight, but offered no clear explanation for total evacuation. Currents carried the vessel at a pace inconsistent with deliberate navigation, yet the ship avoided major hazards. Charts indicated the route had been planned, and weather logs showed no imminent danger. Minor engine malfunction and bilge issues were documented, but not catastrophic. These conditions suggested that the crew might have attempted to abandon ship, yet no practical explanation aligned with the state of remaining provisions, instruments, or lifeboats, leaving the sequence of human decisions a puzzle without resolution. Maritime experts and investigators proposed theories ranging from mutiny and illness to piracy, yet none could reconcile operational evidence with the complete human disappearance. Piracy was discounted due to the intact cargo and untouched valuables. Illness seemed unlikely given the sudden departure, and mutiny left no tangible traces. Hypotheses based on mechanical failure or navigational misjudgment collided with the ordered state of the vessel and preserved equipment. Every plausible scenario contained contradictions, emphasizing that the mystery was defined by absence, not evidence. The Joyita's story challenged conventional understanding, offering a rare instance where operational continuity existed alongside complete human disappearance. Public fascination intensified as newspapers and shipping records documented the Joyita's empty state, portraying it as a ghost ship emblematic of post-war maritime uncertainty. The vessel became a symbol in maritime culture, referenced in reports and literature as an example of how human disappearance can defy explanation. Follow-up expeditions, interviews with nearby vessels, and port investigations yielded nothing conclusive, yet the combination of environmental isolation, partial flooding, and operational readiness ensured that the Joyita's case remained compelling. Its story illustrates a unique intersection of human, mechanical, and environmental factors, leaving observers with a lingering sense of unease and unanswered questions. Preserved through years of investigation, the vessel's story stands as a paradox, partially incapacitated yet entirely abandoned, a puzzle that continues to resist resolution. Each official report, salvage record, and scholarly analysis reaffirmed the central enigma, a capable ship provisioned and navigable carrying no human presence. Modern historians and maritime enthusiasts continue to study her drift patterns, construction, and equipment, hoping for insight. Yet every attempt reinforces the same haunting truth. The Joyita is defined by its silent testimony and absent crew, a reminder that even in an age of technology and procedure, the sea can hold secrets beyond explanation. The Joyita remains suspended in memory, a vessel whose silence conceals the fate of those who once moved along its decks. The Seabird. The Seabird had departed the port under normal conditions, yet when inspectors boarded later, they found no one aboard, as though the crew had vanished into thin air. The decks were orderly, cargo secured, and instruments in their usual places, yet no sound or sign of life persisted. Personal effects lay untouched, meals partially consumed, and logs open to the last recorded entry. Authorities noted that the ship showed no sign of struggle or evacuation. The combination of routine maintenance paused mid-task, and the complete absence of crew created a chilling impression of disappearance without precedent. Constructed for coastal cargo transport, the Seabird combined a reinforced hull with modest living quarters, enabling frequent trips between regional ports without mechanical incident. Her design included twin engines capable of navigating shallow waters and small cargo holds adapted for regional trade. Crew accommodations were sufficient for short journeys, with separate quarters for officers and sailors, and a galley capable of preparing meals for a small team. The vessel's equipment suggested reliability, and previous voyages had been completed without major incident. The ship's reputation for dependable performance made the sudden vanishing of her crew particularly perplexing to maritime authorities. A small but experienced crew handled daily operations, managing navigation, cargo loading, and routine maintenance with familiarity, making their disappearance all the more inexplicable. The captain was a seasoned sailor with decades of coastal experience, while mates and deckhands were trained in both machinery and cargo handling. Each member had participated in multiple voyages along the same routes, familiar with local currents, tides, and weather patterns. Their competence should have allowed them to manage emergencies or mechanical issues efficiently. Yet despite this combined knowledge, no evidence suggested hesitation, conflict, or error that could explain the total evacuation of the vessel from its intended course. Upon examination, neatly arranged cargo, operational instruments, and untouched personal effects indicated that tasks had been interrupted, rather than abandoned in haste or panic. Boxes and barrels remained properly stacked, and all cargo was accounted for according to manifests. Navigation charts were left open to the day's planned route, and engine controls remained in standard positions. Meals were partially prepared in the galley, and tools were left mid-use. These signs implied that crew members had departed in an orderly manner, if at all, and not due to sudden disaster. The absence of any chaotic disturbance reinforced the enigma of a vessel functioning normally without human presence. Minor anomalies in the engine room and bilge suggested recent activity, yet every critical system was largely intact, hinting at oversight rather than catastrophic failure. Pumps showed recent use but were not fully engaged, while engines had been shut down but not damaged. Bilge water remained at a manageable level, and electrical systems were operational, though unattended. Investigators noted that these discrepancies might indicate brief emergency attention or maintenance, yet no indication of why personnel abandoned their posts. The juxtaposition of functional machinery alongside total absence deepened the puzzle, presenting a scenario where human decisions remain unknowable while the vessel continues to operate as intended. Tides, coastal currents, and light fog complicated the vessel's trajectory, yet conditions were not severe enough to account for the crew's total absence. The waters were shallow enough for routine navigation, and weather reports indicated manageable wind and wave conditions. Visibility was reduced intermittently, but not dangerously, and other vessels traversed the same route without incident. Currents could have carried a lifeboat only a short distance, yet no trace of the crew was found nearby. These environmental factors highlighted the paradox. The Seabird remained capable of completing her voyage, yet all human occupants disappeared without a trace, leaving investigators to confront an unexplained absence. During their investigation, authorities meticulously recorded the state of the ship, cataloguing cargo, machinery, and personal belongings, but found no lifeboats deployed or signals sent. Every corner of the vessel was documented in detail, from the wheelhouse to crew cabins. Radio equipment was present but inactive, and no distress signals were transmitted. Investigators examined food stores, navigation charts, and sleeping quarters for signs of emergency, yet nothing indicated panic or conflict. The thoroughness of the inspection made the absence of crew even more remarkable. A functioning vessel abandoned without warning, with no tangible evidence of human fate beyond the ship itself. Engine settings were left in neutral, and navigational charts were open, suggesting human action moments before disappearance. Yet no logical explanation linked these clues to a safe evacuation. It was as if the crew had intended to continue navigation from an alternate location, yet no lifeboats or rafts were found. Instruments were intact, steering unimpeded, and sails properly rigged for short-term operation. The patterns of human decision appeared deliberate, yet led to outcomes entirely inconsistent with survival or safe return. Investigators were left with the paradox of an orderly ship, fully equipped for continued operation, yet devoid of any human guidance or presence. Maritime specialists proposed hypotheses ranging from sudden illness to procedural error, yet none could reconcile the paradox of a fully functional ship and an empty crew. Infectious disease was considered but lacked supporting evidence, while miscommunication or navigational misjudgment could not explain the lack of life or abandoned lifeboats. Even theories of foul play or piracy failed to match the observed condition of cargo, machinery, and personal effects. Each possibility introduced contradictions, reinforcing the mystery rather than resolving it. The Seabird became a case study in unexplained maritime disappearance, defined by operational normalcy juxtaposed against total human absence. News reports and shipping logs chronicled the Seabird's disappearance, marking it as a cautionary tale of coastal navigation, where routine familiarity offered no protection from the unknown. Port authorities filed detailed accounts, noting the discrepancy between the ship's operational capability and the lack of crew. Maritime historians referenced the vessel as an example of unexplained vanishing, highlighting the unsettling reality that even experienced sailors in familiar waters could disappear without a trace. The case has been cited in training materials and shipping literature as an enduring anomaly, illustrating the limits of prediction and control in coastal maritime operations. Decades later, the Seabird remains emblematic of maritime mystery, a vessel that operated flawlessly yet lost all human presence, leaving a void where explanation should reside. Researchers continue to study her construction, drift patterns, and operational protocols in attempts to understand the circumstances. Observers note the contrast between order and absence, functionality and vacancy, underscoring the persistent question: how could an experienced crew vanish from a working vessel without leaving evidence? The unresolved nature of the incident preserves the Seabird as a ghostly symbol of the sea's capacity to conceal human fate, defying conventional logic and expectation. The Seabird drifts quietly in memory, a functioning vessel whose empty decks keep their silent secret from the world. The Zebrina. Fog hung low over the channel, muting the usual bustle of coastal shipping and lending an unsettling stillness to a routine morning. Somewhere amid this quiet, a vessel awaited scrutiny that would reveal only emptiness. The waters were calm, with only the faint lapping against nearby piers breaking the silence. Dockside workers and local pilots noticed nothing unusual as the schooner drifted closer to harbour under minimal wind, yet the absence of crew became immediately apparent. Tools were left in the hold, meals partially prepared, and charts open to routes the vessel had never completed, creating a sense of abrupt human disappearance. From the early 20th century, the schooner incorporated both traditional sails and a small steam engine, representing a period of technological transition in European coastal trade. Her hull was reinforced for cargo transport, yet light enough to navigate shallow channels with ease. Twin masts carried full-rigged sails, while the auxiliary engine provided maneuverability in congested ports or calm seas. Designed for short to medium coastal voyages, the ship blended traditional craftsmanship with modern efficiency, earning a reputation for reliability among shipping companies. Despite this, no amount of engineering foresight could account for the mystery that awaited authorities when they finally boarded. The crew consisted of experienced sailors, accustomed to navigating narrow channels and unpredictable tides, each member trained in both seamanship and cargo management. Officers and mates had logged years of service in European coastal trade, familiar with every port, current and hazard along the route. The deckhands had been selected for reliability and familiarity with both rigging and engine operation. Their combined expertise should have allowed them to manage emergencies efficiently, yet when the schooner was inspected, all personnel were absent without a trace. Even the captain's cabin, normally organised with personal items and logs, offered no hint of decision or departure. On the decks below, cargo lay meticulously stowed, cabins showed no sign of hurried departure, and navigational charts remained open to the intended route, suggesting a routine interrupted without explanation. Barrels of grain, sacks of coal, and crates of manufactured goods were untouched, firmly secured in accordance with standard procedures. The galley contained partially prepared meals, and crew quarters were orderly, with personal belongings carefully arranged. Instruments used for navigation were in proper alignment, leaving investigators perplexed. Every observable sign indicated that the crew had planned to continue their voyage, yet somehow had vanished, leaving a perfectly functional vessel without human guidance. Mechanical systems and rigging were operational, though subtle anomalies, an idle pump, unmonitored engine gauges, hinted at human absence rather than sudden catastrophe. The bilge pumps had recently been used but were not fully engaged, and engine pressure remained within safe limits but unattended. Sails were properly furled and rigging taut, yet there was no evidence of recent manoeuvring. Investigators noted that these details suggested human presence shortly before disappearance, but no longer. The ship functioned as if the crew had simply stepped away and never returned, a phenomenon both technically and psychologically difficult to reconcile for maritime experts. Coastal currents, tidal shifts, and moderate winds offered no convincing rationale for abandoning the vessel, as conditions were entirely navigable for skilled mariners. Weather reports confirmed light winds and manageable tides, suitable for both sail and engine operation. Visibility was reduced by fog, yet not enough to pose a significant danger. There were no nearby hazards, sandbanks, or collisions reported that could justify evacuation. Even a sudden change in conditions would not have required the complete abandonment observed. This geographical and environmental context emphasized the mystery. A ship fully capable of navigating its intended route, yet entirely deserted without a trace. Every compartment was examined by authorities recording cargo, instruments, and crew effects, yet they found no trace of personnel or evidence to clarify their sudden disappearance. Bilges, holds, and cabins were inspected and logged in meticulous detail, while port officials and marine surveyors ensured no stone was left unturned. Radio equipment remained in place, though unused, and no distress signals had been transmitted. Even the lifeboats were accounted for, secured, and undisturbed. The paradox persisted. The Zebrina remained fully functional and ready for navigation, but no human presence remained, leaving investigators confronted with a scenario that defied both logic and maritime precedent. In examining the case, investigators debated technical failure, navigational error, and human misjudgment, but none could reconcile a ship both fully functional and entirely deserted. Possible engine malfunction, sudden illness, or mistaken judgment in dense fog were considered, yet none could explain the absence of distress signals or an attempted return to port. The ship's sails and engine indicated careful, deliberate attention, incompatible with panic. Even standard emergency protocols could not justify leaving an operational vessel with no crew. Theories offered only temporary relief to investigators' confusion, highlighting the stark reality that the cause of the disappearance remained entirely beyond contemporary understanding or standard maritime procedure. Contemporary accounts suggested potential misinterpreted signals or sudden illness, though each hypothesis collided with the absence of lifeboats or distress signals. Newspapers chronicled the event with fascination and fear, framing it as both a cautionary tale and an anomaly. Some speculated that a miscommunication from the vessel's wireless system might have prompted the evacuation, but no equipment was damaged or activated. Observers recorded the schooner's intact cargo and orderly decks, noting that each detail contradicted any plausible explanation. The public and maritime community alike were left with speculation, rumours, and unanswered questions, as the evidence suggested that the disappearance occurred not from force, accident, or error, but from something entirely untraceable. Newspaper reports and maritime logs documented the Zebrina's unexplained fate, cementing its status as a cautionary tale where technological reliability offered no safeguard against human disappearance. Official records recorded the ship's specifications, cargo, crew list, and maintenance history, yet all failed to illuminate the mystery. Scholars, marine historians, and shipping authorities revisited the case repeatedly, noting its uniqueness among early 20th century shipping incidents. The combination of industrial-era design, auxiliary steam power, and disciplined crew underscored the paradox. A vessel built for safety and routine could not prevent the sudden absence of those entrusted to operate it. Over time, the Zebrina has become emblematic of early industrial-era maritime mystery, a craft whose design promised security yet could not explain the void left aboard. It stands in contrast to other vanished ships because of the clear presence of operational capability alongside total human absence. Her decks remain a symbol of unresolved maritime phenomena, demonstrating that even technological innovation cannot guarantee human safety. The absence of crew, despite adequate tools, knowledge, and environmental conditions, preserves the vessel as a ghostly reminder of what can vanish without warning or trace, defying conventional explanation. Across the seas of memory, the Zebrina drifts as a vessel whose precision and design could not prevent the complete and inexplicable disappearance of those who once commanded her. The High Aim 6. Morning sunlight glinted off the shallow waters near the subtropical coastline, where fishing vessels moved steadily through channels locals considered familiar and safe, yet one boat carried a mystery no observer could have anticipated. The morning air was thick with the scent of salt and seaweed, and the usual chatter of fishermen preparing for work contrasted sharply with the eerie emptiness about to be revealed. Nearby boats passed without noticing anything amiss until the High Aim 6 drew closer, its motors humming without human guidance. The vessel's deck remained empty, tools in place, lines coiled neatly, and meals untouched. Each detail spoke of abrupt departure and unexplained absence, a scenario both ordinary and profoundly unsettling. The High Aim 6 was a modest-sized vessel built for nearshore fishing and equipped with modern engines, sonar devices, and storage compartments designed for both speed and utility along the coast. Its hull was reinforced for frequent trips in shallow waters and coral-laden channels, while radar equipment allowed for the detection of nearby vessels and underwater obstacles. Fishing nets and cages were stored on deck alongside ice-filled holds intended to preserve daily catches. Despite these modern adaptations, the boat could still be handled manually, providing a combination of traditional seamanship and contemporary efficiency that ensured a smooth operation in the subtropical maritime environment. Its crew consisted of seasoned fishermen, accustomed to navigating the intricacies of tidal shifts, shallow sandbars, and sudden squalls, each member capable of handling both vessel operation and catch management with practiced efficiency. Records indicated that each sailor had extensive experience in local waters, and their daily routines included careful monitoring of both engine systems and navigational charts. The captain, a veteran of 2 decades of coastal fishing, knew the area intimately and had prepared contingency plans for emergencies. Nothing in the crew's background suggested recklessness or unusual behaviour, emphasising the abruptness and inexplicability of their disappearance. On the morning in question, the team had departed under routine conditions, checking nets, motors and safety equipment in preparation for a day of predictable labour, unaware that the ordinary would soon become extraordinary. Logs from nearby ports showed the vessel had received clearance and passed inspections without incident. The departure was noted in local records as typical, and other boats departed the harbour simultaneously, none anticipating anything amiss. The crew's movements were methodical, consistent with seasoned practice. Engines warmed, equipment arranged, and communications checked. Yet, sometime shortly after leaving the harbour, the entire crew vanished, leaving a functioning vessel unoccupied and a trail of unanswered questions. Observers on nearby boats later noted the absence of any human activity aboard the High Aim 6, even as lights flickered and motors remained engaged, a silent contradiction between function and occupancy. Binoculars revealed untended fishing lines swaying in the water and life jackets resting neatly in lockers. The engine emitted a steady hum, and navigational lights blinked in rhythm with operational protocols. Yet, no figure could be seen on deck adjusting rigging, monitoring instruments, or attending to any vessel function. The apparent normalcy deepened the mystery, as everything aboard suggested presence and readiness, while in reality, no crew remained to interact with the ship. Data from weather stations confirmed calm seas, mild winds, and stable tides, while underwater currents and coastal features offered no immediate threat, leaving environmental hazards an unlikely explanation for the sudden vacancy. Conditions were favourable for navigation, with visibility adequate for observing nearby boats and coastal landmarks. Even the subtropical fog that occasionally rolled in would not have been sufficient to trigger evacuation or panic. No storms, sandbanks, or reported collisions occurred during the critical hours, ruling out common maritime hazards. The environment, in essence, did not justify abandoning a fully operational vessel in such manageable and predictable waters. Upon boarding the vessel, authorities recorded the state of navigation, cargo, and personal effects, finding everything in order yet entirely unattended, creating a perplexing scenario for investigators accustomed to routine maritime incidents. Logs, checklists, and engine gauges were examined and photographed. The galley contained partially prepared meals, and crew quarters were tidy with personal belongings arranged as if expecting imminent return. Fishing equipment remained ready, nets coiled and traps secured. Investigators found no signs of struggle or forced exit, and all safety gear was accounted for. Every observable element suggested deliberate human attention recently, yet paradoxically, the vessel was devoid of its operators. Equipment appeared fully operational, engines could run, electronics functioned normally, and fishing gear lay ready for use. Yet each system's proper state contrasted sharply with the absence of anyone to manage them. Sonar monitors displayed consistent readings, navigation lights continued to blink, and engine gauges registered standard operating ranges. Even communications devices were functional but unused, indicating no attempt to signal distress. The juxtaposition of readiness and abandonment confounded experts. The ship was mechanically capable of continued operation, yet devoid of human command. This disparity suggested a sudden, unexplained interruption, leaving investigators to speculate on possible explanations that fit neither accident nor deliberate planning. Analysts considered possibilities ranging from sudden medical emergencies to misjudged local hazards, but none aligned with the evidence. A ship functioning perfectly without the presence of its crew, leaving theories unresolved. No reports indicated illness or injury, and medical supplies aboard were untouched. The vessel's location posed no imminent danger, and communications equipment had remained silent. Hypotheses such as temporary departure or miscommunication failed, as the boat's operational system suggested attention shortly before disappearance. Every scenario, plausible or otherwise, collided with a simple reality. The crew had vanished, leaving a normal working vessel as a silent testament to an unexplained maritime enigma. News outlets and maritime records chronicled the disappearance, highlighting the strange intersection of ordinary coastal labour, reliable vessel design, and complete human absence, capturing public fascination and cautionary speculation alike. Local papers ran stories emphasising the improbability of a crew leaving a functional vessel under calm conditions. Maritime boards and insurance investigators examined logs, vessel design, and crew experience, yet all efforts to explain the incident failed. Communities along the coast recounted rumours and speculation, while historians noted the rarity of such cases in the modern era. The High Aim 6 became emblematic of how even routine operations could yield enduring mysteries. Even years later, the High Aim 6 remains a modern coastal enigma, a craft that operated as intended, yet defied explanation through the vanishing of those who should have commanded it. Technical manuals, operational logs, and survivor accounts from other vessels provided no clues. Scholars, maritime authorities, and local fishermen continue to debate the event, emphasizing the contrast between procedural normalcy and sudden human absence. The vessel has become a symbol of unexplained maritime phenomena in modern waters, demonstrating that even contemporary design and experience cannot always account for disappearance or human unpredictability. Recalled by generations of sailors, the High M6 exists as a functioning vessel, its ordinary day transformed into an enduring mystery, leaving behind only empty decks and unanswered questions. The Ourang Medan. The first signs of trouble aboard the Ourang Medan emerged through the radio, where operators noted garbled Morse code interspersed with frantic, incomprehensible phrases. No ship in the region reported collisions or mechanical issues, and yet the messages suggested distress of the most unusual kind. The vessel, a modest cargo ship operating in the late 1940s, seemed otherwise unremarkable, designed to transport goods efficiently along the Indonesian and Malaysian coasts. Its sudden descent into the unknown began as a whisper in communication logs, hinting at a calamity that would leave investigators baffled and the maritime community unsettled for decades. The Ourang Medan itself was a practical, steel-hulled freighter built to endure coastal voyages rather than oceanic storms, with ample cargo capacity and a modest crew complement. Its hold was designed to transport general merchandise safely, while the engine room and navigation equipment were maintained to ensure reliable operation under typical conditions. Nothing about the ship's specifications suggested vulnerability, and all inspection records before the fateful voyage confirmed seaworthiness. On paper, it was a vessel that should have weathered its journeys without incident, yet the story that would emerge would be anything but routine. The crew was composed of experienced sailors familiar with regional waters, tides, and currents, accustomed to the logistics of cargo loading and maritime protocol. Officers maintained strict oversight, while deckhands and engineers followed established routines, creating an operational rhythm that rarely left room for surprises. Daily life aboard the ship involved checks of machinery, monitoring navigation charts, and securing cargo, all tasks carried out with efficiency and coordination. The men had no known conflicts or issues of discipline, and their records showed competency and professionalism, providing a stark contrast to the inexplicable fate that awaited them. The voyage began under ordinary circumstances, with cargo stored and tied securely, engines tested and operating smoothly, and navigation charts verified. The vessel maintained its schedule, moving along the intended course between ports. Log entries indicated routine activity, and no anomalies were recorded in the early stages. Officers reported normal mechanical function, and nothing in the ship's documentation suggested any emerging danger. At first, the journey appeared completely unremarkable, a typical example of regional maritime commerce, with each crew member fulfilling responsibilities that kept the vessel moving along predictable and safe lines. Radio signals from the Ourang Medan soon became alarming, however, as they devolved into fragmented Morse code punctuated with odd, distressing words. Nearby stations recorded these messages but could not discern meaning, as repeated transmissions contained phrases suggesting fear, confusion, or sudden illness among the crew. While no neighbouring ship observed visible damage or unusual weather events, the content of these signals indicated a crisis unprecedented in the vessel's operating history. Efforts to reach the ship directly were unsuccessful, and the increasingly frantic transmissions left maritime authorities with the first glimpse of a mystery that would defy conventional explanation. When the vessel was finally boarded by investigators, they encountered a scene of profound horror. Every crew member lay dead spread across the deck, bridge, and engine room. Faces were frozen in expressions of terror, eyes wide open, hands grasping at nothing, with no signs of injury, violence, or struggle. Personal belongings were undisturbed, and the cargo remained secured. Instruments and machinery continued to function normally, suggesting the ship had been operational at the time of the crew's demise. The discovery created immediate questions about how a fully capable crew could perish so suddenly and without an external cause. Assessment of the ship's equipment confirmed that engines were in working order, navigational instruments functioned accurately, and all essential systems were intact. Cargo showed no evidence of contamination, and no leaks or chemical exposure could be confirmed. Ship logs contained routine entries until the final transmissions, with no indication of mechanical or environmental hazards. This juxtaposition, fully operational systems alongside a completely deceased crew, amplified the enigma, leaving authorities with an unexplained and chilling scenario that resisted conventional maritime reasoning. Oceanic researchers and investigative officials proposed several hypotheses, including accidental toxic gas exposure, chemical fumes from cargo, or sudden psychological panic. Yet each theory confronted the contradiction of an experienced, disciplined crew succumbing simultaneously. There were no signs of external attack or natural disaster, and environmental conditions were within normal parameters. Even speculative accounts, which later fueled legend and rumour, could not definitively explain the abrupt deaths. The Ourang Medan thus remained an unresolved case, a rare convergence of ordinary operation and extraordinary mortality that confounded both contemporary and later investigators. As word spread, the Ourang Medan became the subject of maritime lore, inspiring reports, books, and oral accounts in regional ports. Its reputation grew not only from the mysterious deaths, but also from the chilling visual of a ship that seemed perfectly functional yet completely devoid of life. The case captured imaginations because it blurred the line between fact and speculation. a vessel simultaneously recorded in maritime logs and whispered about in legends of the sea. For sailors and historians alike, it became a cautionary example of the limits of understanding when human life collides with unknown forces. Long after the incident, the story of the Ourang Medan continues to attract attention, remaining a topic of debate among maritime scholars, enthusiasts, and paranormal investigators. Archival research confirms key factual elements: the ship's design, cargo, crew composition, and recorded transmissions. Yet beyond these verifiable details, the mystery persists, resisting resolution and inviting speculation. Its legacy lies in the profound questions it raises about human vulnerability, the potential hazards of maritime cargo, and the limitations of reason in the face of unexplained phenomena. Within nautical archives, the Ourang Medan persists as an extraordinary case in which every ordinary element, a functioning vessel, competent crew, standard cargo, collided with the utterly inexplicable. Each aspect of the ship points to normalcy, yet the deaths defy rational explanation, leaving the case open to conjecture and haunting curiosity. Its story has cemented itself in seafaring history as a singular event, an unresolved narrative of human fragility amidst the machinery of commerce, where nothing about the environment or the ship itself accounts for the fate of those aboard. No voice has ever explained what claimed the Ourang Medan's crew, and the ship itself seems to carry the weight of their last unanswered fear. The SS Baychimo. Trade along the frozen Arctic coast demanded vessels built to endure crushing ice and freezing seas, and among these the SS Baychimo plied the northern routes carrying furs, supplies and goods essential to isolated communities. For years, it operated without incident, a dependable presence in harsh conditions that often humbled other ships. Yet in the winter of 1931, what began as routine Arctic commerce took a turn that would embed the Baychimo in maritime legend. It was not the vessel itself that faltered, but the human presence aboard that would vanish, leaving an enduring enigma. The Baychimo was constructed with a reinforced steel hull, designed specifically for northern navigation where ice pressure could crush weaker ships. Its engine and cargo holds were engineered to maintain functionality under extreme cold, while decks and rigging were strengthened to resist frost and snow. In Arctic shipping, this combination of structural integrity and adaptability was essential, and the Baychimo embodied the apex of these practical measures. Yet this very durability would make its later abandonment all the more mysterious, as it proved capable of surviving alone in conditions that would have claimed lesser freighters in short order. Captain and crew were seasoned men, adept at handling ice flows, navigating narrow passages, and monitoring the machinery necessary for Arctic voyages. Officers maintained vigilance over engines and navigation charts, while deckhands managed cargo and constantly observed ice conditions. The crew's expertise rendered the vessel reliable, a floating instrument of predictable human control. It is precisely this skill and experience that magnifies the mystery of their disappearance. No mechanical failure, inexperience, or navigational error could explain why such a competent team would leave a fully operational ship to drift alone in one of the most unforgiving maritime environments on Earth. During the winter of 1931, the Baychimo became trapped in pack ice off the coast of Alaska, a scenario that would prompt the crew to evacuate for safety. Authorities ordered lifeboats deployed, provisions taken, and temporary shelters established on shore. Despite the vessel's intact structure and operational machinery, human judgment dictated evacuation to prevent loss of life. The Baychimo remained frozen but largely undamaged, a silent witness to its crew's careful retreat. This event marked the beginning of a decades-long phenomenon in which the ship would repeatedly appear and vanish, earning a reputation that blurred the boundary between maritime record and legend. On subsequent voyages past the Baychimo, travellers found it surprisingly intact. Its decks remained clear, cargo untouched, and engines occasionally reported as functional or at least undisturbed. While ice and frost claimed small portions of rigging, the ship resisted damage that would have crushed other freighters. Its endurance created a tension between human absence and vessel resilience, offering a ghostly tableau for those who encountered it. Each sighting raised questions. How could the ship drift so far without crew intervention, and why did it persist in an environment that normally exacted immediate consequences for abandonment? For nearly 4 decades, the Baychimo appeared intermittently along Arctic routes. hunters, trappers, and maritime patrols recorded sightings of a seemingly abandoned freighter moving with the currents, frozen decks glinting in sunlight, yet carrying no living crew. Each report added to its growing reputation as a ghost ship, a vessel capable of withstanding extreme conditions while humans remained conspicuously absent. The consistency of these sightings created a pattern of intrigue, prompting speculation among officials and locals alike, and ensuring the Baychimo would remain a subject of fascination far beyond the practical concerns of maritime commerce. The ship's structural integrity during these years was remarkable. Despite repeated exposure to sub-zero temperatures, shifting ice and storms, the steel hull resisted punctures and the cargo holds remained sealed. Observers noted that rigging and masts, while weathered, were functional enough to suggest the vessel could still sail if manned. This durability reinforced the unsettling fact of abandonment. The Baychimo could have remained under human control indefinitely, yet it drifted alone, fully capable yet bereft of guidance, emphasizing the dissonance between machine functionality and human absence that defines the enduring mystery. Attempts to salvage the Baychimo failed repeatedly. Expeditions dispatched to retrieve the vessel were thwarted by harsh ice conditions, unpredictable drift, and logistical obstacles, leaving the ship to continue its enigmatic journey. Even with modern equipment, the combination of Arctic isolation and the vessel's resilience rendered human intervention largely ineffective. These failures added to the mystique, reinforcing the notion that the Baychimo had a strange autonomy, drifting under its own momentum yet impervious to full recovery. Each abandoned attempt contributed to the growing legend, documenting a freighter that defied conventional understanding of maritime salvage and the limits of human control. Accounts from Inuit communities and regional traders blended observation with folklore, describing a ship that seemed almost alive in its persistence. Some tales spoke of the Baychimo appearing to change course, evading capture, or vanishing in ways that defied explanation. While historians treat these stories cautiously, they reflect the psychological impact of repeated sightings of a fully intact yet unmanned vessel. Oral narratives framed the Baychimo as a ghost ship in both a literal and symbolic sense, one whose presence haunted not only the ice floes, but also the imaginations of those who witnessed it. Maritime records provide plausible explanations, including the effects of wind, ocean currents, and ice drift, but none fully account for the ship's decades-long survival and repeated appearances. Even careful modelling of Arctic conditions cannot explain the apparent longevity of an abandoned freighter in extreme weather. These gaps in understanding highlight the limits of conventional reasoning when applied to unusual maritime phenomena, leaving the Baychimo as both a factual anomaly and a subject of legend. It occupies a space where practical explanations and mystery intersect, maintaining relevance for scholars, sailors, and storytellers alike. The final recorded sightings of the Baychimo occurred in the 1960s, after which it disappeared without a trace, leaving behind photographs, observer reports, and a wealth of anecdotal accounts. Its legacy endures in Arctic history as an extraordinary example of a ship capable of surviving decades of exposure without crew, becoming a symbol of human vulnerability and the persistence of inanimate objects in hostile environments. Its story challenges assumptions about abandonment, endurance, and the strange persistence of vessels left to drift beyond human oversight, ensuring that the ship's legend remains alive in maritime memory. The SS Baychimo slipped forever into Arctic legend, a vessel that outlasted decades, ice, and human expectation, carrying only questions in place of a crew. The Ruan Maru. Squid fishing along Japan's northern coast relied on vessels designed to endure the unpredictable currents and seasonal storms of the Pacific, and among these, the Ruan Maru performed its duties with unremarkable efficiency. Before 2011, the ship followed a reliable schedule, departing from ports in Aomori Prefecture to harvest squid and other marine products, returning each trip with its holds full and crew intact. Its disappearance would not be gradual or due to poor design, but the result of extraordinary circumstances, leaving behind a vessel fully operational yet entirely bereft of human presence, an anomaly in modern maritime operations. The Ruan Maru was a steel-hulled vessel, equipped with twin diesel engines, reinforced decks, and navigational instruments that allowed precise course plotting even under challenging conditions. Its design reflected contemporary maritime standards for safety and efficiency, making it capable of returning to port without difficulty under normal circumstances. The hold and cargo spaces were insulated for fish storage, and the deck machinery was engineered to endure salt water and exposure without failing. All of these features, intended to sustain human commerce in rigorous environments, would later highlight the puzzle of why the ship continued to drift uncrewed while retaining full operational potential. Life aboard the Ruan Maru followed a precise routine. Crew members rotated shifts to maintain engines and monitor instruments, while nets were deployed, inspected, and stowed under careful supervision. The captain oversaw navigation and communication, ensuring coordination with nearby ports and other vessels. Every hatch, cable, and control was familiar to the men and women aboard, who treated the ship as an extension of their own expertise. This degree of intimate knowledge reinforces the mystery. The disappearance was not due to negligence or ignorance, yet the ship would soon be abandoned, drifting autonomously while all its systems remained intact and functional. March 11, 2011 changed everything. A 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the coast of Tohoku generated a massive tsunami, flooding ports and sweeping vessels inland or out to sea. The Ruan Maru, like countless other ships, was caught in the immediate surge. Crew and emergency personnel evacuated to safety, leaving the vessel behind in conditions that threatened both land and life. The ship itself, while displaced and partially grounded, remained structurally sound, its engines and equipment untouched. This sudden transition from controlled crewed operation to solitary drift established the basis for a mystery, framed not by neglect but by natural disaster. In the aftermath, the partially stranded Ruan Maru remained largely intact. Observers noted that deck cabins were undisturbed, nets were stowed properly, and machinery appeared operational. No signs suggested that human activity had been interrupted by mechanical failure. Instead, the absence of crew resulted solely from the tsunami's force. The vessel's survival in this state created a strange tension. A modern ship, engineered for resilience, capable of self-propulsion under its engines, yet entirely without its human operators. It existed as a paradox, a functional object designed for human activity, yet completely abandoned, drifting between disaster and human imagination. Over the following months, sightings of the ship appeared sporadically along coastal and open waters. Maritime authorities, local fishers, and photographers documented its movement, noting that it travelled under currents and wind while remaining uncrewed. Each sighting emphasised both endurance and mystery. The ship remained fully intact, capable of navigation, yet operated by no one. The vessel's presence became a symbol of the tsunami's far-reaching impact and of human vulnerability against forces beyond control. These reports cemented the Ruan Maru's reputation as a contemporary ghost ship, a modern parallel to legendary abandoned vessels of history. The ship's condition during sightings reinforced its enigma. Engines appeared functional, communication systems untouched, and rigging intact, while the hold and deck machinery remained orderly. Observers reported that nothing aboard seemed disturbed or damaged, a fact that magnified the contrast between absence and capability. Unlike older freighters abandoned due to mechanical failure or navigational error, the Ruan Maru demonstrated resilience in the face of catastrophe. Each sighting challenged assumptions. The ship could have been claimed, guided, or salvaged, yet persisted autonomously, drifting under natural forces alone, a testament to both engineering durability and the lingering power of chance. Salvage operations attempted to secure the vessel, yet the Ruan Maru remained elusive. Towing and retrieval were hindered by unpredictable tides, strong currents, and the sheer logistics of manoeuvring a grounded yet seaworthy ship. Each unsuccessful attempt added to the narrative of the ship as a drifting anomaly, an object resistant to human intervention. Even in an era of modern maritime tracking and technology, the vessel demonstrated the limits of control, highlighting how disaster can render capable ships untethered yet not destroyed. Its endurance became a case study in maritime persistence under circumstances where neither crew nor machinery could restore conventional order. Media and local communities quickly framed the ship as a ghost vessel, a floating relic of the tsunami's devastation. Photographs circulated in newspapers and online, portraying the Ruan Maru adrift and uncrewed, its engines idle yet intact. The public fascination was immediate, blending reality with a sense of surreal dislocation. Experts weighed in, providing technical explanations for drift and buoyancy, while eyewitnesses emphasized the uncanny aura of a functioning ship without humans aboard. These narratives contributed to a complex understanding where fact, observation and legend intersected, preserving the vessel as a symbol of both modern engineering and human vulnerability. Oceanographers and maritime engineers analysed the vessel's movements, proposing plausible explanations involving prevailing currents, wind and buoyancy. While these factors partially accounted for trajectory and drift, they failed to fully explain the ship's longevity, repeated sightings, and distance travelled. The Ruan Maru's endurance defied conventional expectations for abandoned modern vessels. Even in a highly monitored maritime environment, its uncrewed persistence highlighted gaps in understanding about oceanic forces and vessel dynamics. The limits of scientific explanation only enhanced the mystique, situating the ship as both a factual object and a narrative of contemporary maritime mystery. By the time it disappeared from observation, the Ruan Maru had drifted hundreds of miles from its port of origin. Its final fate remains uncertain, though some reports suggest it was grounded or recovered years later without public confirmation. The vessel's journey, however, had already entered public consciousness, illustrating the paradox of a modern ship that could navigate oceans and survive disaster yet remain untended and unclaimed. It serves as a reminder that even contemporary vessels, designed with advanced technology, are vulnerable to extraordinary natural events, and that human absence can turn familiarity into intrigue. The legacy of the Ruan Maru lies not only in its survival, but in the questions it leaves behind. Why did it persist unclaimed? How far did it drift? And what does it reveal about the interface between human agency and natural catastrophe? Its story intersects disaster, maritime engineering and public imagination, transforming a simple fishing vessel into a symbol of endurance and mystery. By tracing its path, observers glimpse the limits of control, the power of the ocean, and the enduring allure of a ship left to traverse the seas without human oversight. The Ruan Maru drifted on, a silent witness to disaster, carrying the absence of its crew like a message no one could decipher. The Jenny. In the early 1800s, the Jenny was commissioned to navigate the bustling trade routes between Europe and the West Indies, carrying timber, sugar, and other commodities essential to the growing economies of the era. Merchants entrusted the vessel with significant investment, relying on its capacity to endure months at sea while delivering cargo safely to distant ports. Though outwardly unremarkable, the Jenny represented the lifeblood of commerce and the interdependence of nations linked by maritime trade. Its disappearance without a trace of its crew would later highlight the vulnerability of even the most ordinary merchant ship in a world defined by both human enterprise and unpredictable maritime forces. Built with sturdy oak timbers and a well-balanced hull, the Jenny measured approximately 300 tons and was equipped with multiple masts designed to harness prevailing winds efficiently for transatlantic crossings. Its rigging, carefully arranged and maintained, allowed for both speed and stability, while reinforced decks could withstand the stress of heavy cargo and seasonal storms. Navigational tools included a compass, charts, and basic celestial instruments, enabling the crew to plot courses across the Atlantic. These features underscore the mystery. The ship was fully capable of returning under competent management, yet would drift uncrewed, its capabilities intact, leaving observers and historians alike to wonder why no one remained aboard. Crew members aboard the Jenny were seasoned sailors, each assigned specific responsibilities that range from navigation and sail management to cargo maintenance and watchkeeping, all contributing to the precise rhythm of daily life at sea. The captain, a man of considerable experience, oversaw operations and ensured that orders were executed with exactness. Ordinary tasks from mending sails to checking ballast were performed methodically, reflecting the discipline necessary for long voyages. The presence of such an experienced crew emphasizes the enigma. Their disappearance could not be attributed to incompetence, negligence, or ordinary misadventure, suggesting that some extraordinary and sudden event must have prompted them to abandon a fully functional vessel. The Jenny departed its home port fully laden, with provisions sufficient for months at sea and a detailed itinerary intended to maximize trade efficiency while minimizing exposure to seasonal storms and pirate activity. The route included stops at several Caribbean islands known for their bustling harbours and frequent trade exchanges. Letters of instruction and cargo manifests were meticulously documented, providing evidence of the voyage's planning and the expectations of both merchants and crew. These preparations make the ship's later abandonment all the more perplexing. Nothing in its departure suggested risk, yet the vessel would soon be observed drifting without its crew, intact and ready for normal operation. Records suggest that at some point during the voyage, an unexplained event occurred, leaving the vessel completely abandoned despite favourable weather and the absence of any visible threat to its hull or crew. Contemporary maritime documents hint at sudden confusion or emergency, but provide no clear cause. The absence of the crew might indicate evacuation prompted by perceived danger, yet no wreckage, fire, or evidence of piracy was reported. Investigators would later examine the ship's course, hull, and cargo condition, all of which remained orderly. The tension between preparation, capability, and unexplained human absence forms the central mystery, underscoring the Jenny's enduring place in maritime lore. When the ship was eventually sighted by other mariners, its decks were orderly, cargo secure, and sails partially set, offering a silent testament to the abrupt disappearance of those who had managed the ship with expertise and care. No signs of struggle were evident, nor were personal belongings disturbed. The orderly condition suggested that the crew left intentionally, yet with no recorded rationale. Observers described the sight as unsettling, a functioning vessel moving with natural currents, exhibiting all outward appearances of routine operation, but entirely bereft of life. This juxtaposition of efficiency and absence amplified the aura of unease surrounding the Jenny, cementing its status as a ghost ship. Witness accounts from passing vessels noted that the Jenny seemed almost purposeful in its drift, following currents without human guidance, yet behaving as though the crew's intent had been left embedded in its operation. Navigational charts and rudimentary compass readings indicated no intervention, yet the ship's trajectory often mirrored plausible routes to nearby ports. Sailors expressed both admiration and apprehension at its apparent autonomy. The pattern of movement reinforced the mystery, suggesting that a human presence had been abruptly removed from a complex system that continued to operate seamlessly. Observers could not explain how a ship so dependent on crew management maintained such coherence in its absence. Boarding the ship to secure it revealed that all personal effects were undisturbed, navigational instruments remained in place, and no signs of struggle or damage were evident, deepening the mystery of its abandonment. The galley showed no signs of sudden evacuation, meals remained unclaimed, and living quarters were orderly. Cargo was properly stowed, reinforcing the sense that the crew had intended to maintain control but never returned. These findings baffled authorities, who could not reconcile the vessel's condition with the total disappearance of its human operators. Each inspection only compounded the sense of enigma, highlighting the contrast between predictable maritime practice and inexplicable absence. Early hypotheses included sudden illness, mutiny, or misadventure, but thorough investigations found no supporting evidence for any scenario, leaving historians to confront the unsettling possibility of a perfectly executed yet unexplained evacuation. Weather reports indicated fair conditions during the period, while other ships in the vicinity encountered no hazards sufficient to necessitate abandoning a seaworthy vessel. The complete lack of physical evidence left speculation unable to reach definitive conclusions. Scholars and maritime experts alike remain divided, acknowledging that the Jenny represents a rare instance in which human decision-making vanished without a trace, leaving a vessel fully capable of operation yet entirely devoid of life. Over the decades, the Jenny became a subject of maritime lore, appearing in records, journals, and oral histories as a symbol of how even ordinary merchant vessels could become extraordinary mysteries under enigmatic circumstances. Tales circulated among sailors, emphasizing the inexplicable disappearance of its crew and the ship's seemingly autonomous drift. Each retelling highlighted different aspects: the meticulous stowage of cargo, the untouched personal effects, or the vessel's silent movement through open waters. The narrative blended fact and legend, illustrating how human fascination with unexplained phenomena can elevate a simple merchant ship into an enduring enigma that continues to intrigue historians and seafarers alike. the Chronicle of the Jenny challenges assumptions about control and preparedness at sea, revealing the fragility of human presence when confronted by forces or events that remain undocumented and unknowable. Unlike ships lost to storms or piracy, the Jenny departed on a routine voyage yet returned, or rather drifted, without any crew to guide it. Its existence raises questions about human vulnerability, the limits of maritime foresight, and the way unanticipated events can transform ordinary vessels into timeless mysteries. Scholars continue to analyse the circumstances, yet the ship's abandonment defies comprehensive explanation, leaving the story unresolved even centuries later. Echoes of the Jenny are preserved not only in historical records, but also in the imagination of those who consider what might have compelled its crew to vanish. Each detail, from deck arrangement to cargo integrity, provides clues while simultaneously deepening the enigma. The ship's quiet endurance underscores the tension between human planning and the unknown, between ordinary maritime operations and the extraordinary events that can render such preparation meaningless. As a case study, the Jenny exemplifies the enduring allure of ghost ships, vessels fully capable of travel yet bereft of those they were designed to carry. The Jenny wanders across history, a vessel whose empty decks preserve the silence of a crew lost to an unknown fate. The Resolute. Commissioned for long-distance trade in the early 19th century, the Resolute carried expectations of reliability and endurance, promising both merchants and crew a voyage governed by routine and careful preparation. Built to ply established maritime routes between northern ports and the Atlantic, she was a familiar sight to dockworkers and shipwrights alike. Records show that her design was straightforward, yet efficient, prioritising cargo capacity alongside stability, a balance critical for navigating unpredictable weather. The ship's very existence reflected confidence in human planning and craftsmanship, and yet the voyage she undertook would become one of the most confounding maritime disappearances in history. Its hull, built from dense timbers and reinforced with iron fastenings, was designed to withstand Atlantic swells, while the arrangement of its 3 masts and expansive sails maximised speed without sacrificing stability. Detailed shipbuilding notes describe how each plank was carefully caulked and treated to resist moisture, and how the rigging was arranged for optimal handling by a minimal crew. The cargo hold was robust, capable of carrying heavy goods across hundreds of miles without compromising the ship's buoyancy. These technical specifications established the Resolute as a vessel expected to endure storms and ocean currents, making the later disappearance of its crew all the more perplexing. The captain and his team were seasoned mariners, each entrusted with responsibilities ranging from charting courses to maintaining the ship's rigging, their combined experience offering little reason to anticipate failure. Contemporary records describe the captain as methodical and cautious, with years of Atlantic navigation behind him. Officers and crew were similarly experienced, having served on vessels of comparable size and trade. None were known for recklessness or insubordination, and their departure logs suggest a disciplined and prepared company. It was a crew whose competence should have prevented disaster, and yet their absence would prompt decades of speculation, leaving historians to wonder what could have prompted such an extraordinary abandonment. Departing from a bustling northern port, the Resolute set sail with a cargo of coal and timber, provisions for the crew meticulously documented and stowed to endure weeks at sea. Port records confirm the loading and inspection of cargo, with manifests detailing quantities, weights, and intended delivery points. Crew lists corroborate the presence of a fully staffed vessel, including officers, sailors, and a small contingent responsible for maintenance. The initial course was well charted, following established trade routes and taking advantage of predictable currents. No unusual weather was forecasted, and yet within days the ship's planned schedule diverged in ways that would later become central to its enduring mystery. Routine aboard the vessel followed a strict schedule of watches, maintenance, and navigational checks, with logbooks meticulously recording wind direction, course changes, and minor incidents, all suggesting a journey proceeding without notable difficulty. Daily entries reflect a disciplined operation, sails trimmed according to wind, hull inspections conducted, and personal chores completed. Meals were noted, repairs logged, and anchor drills conducted as per standard procedure. There is no indication of tension among the crew or mechanical failure during this period. The orderly nature of these logs reinforces the disquieting fact that nothing appeared to threaten the ship, yet the eventual disappearance would occur with no warning, leaving only these records to trace what might have been. Yet at some point, the ship's trajectory deviated in ways that observers later described as unusual, though no evidence indicated storm, collision, or other immediate hazards to the hull or crew. Witness accounts from passing vessels recorded a ship sailing without a visible crew, yet otherwise structurally sound. Minor course corrections were unattended, and sails appeared trimmed with no hands at work. Investigators later noted that such observations were inconsistent with both panic abandonment and mechanical failure. This discrepancy created one of the central enigmas. A seaworthy ship, with a capable crew trained to react to danger, apparently left to continue unaided, drifting toward uncertainty with no record of intent or explanation. When other vessels later approached, the Resolute appeared fully operational, sails adjusted, deck equipment orderly, cargo intact, and no sign of struggle or haste, yet entirely devoid of those responsible for its navigation. The lifeboats remained secured, tools were in place, and personal effects of the crew were undisturbed, offering no evidence of hurried departure. Observers were baffled by the contrast between the vessel's readiness and the absence of its crew, a dichotomy that has persisted in maritime studies. Even seasoned sailors were perplexed, recognizing that a ship of this capability would not be abandoned lightly, yet it floated as if its occupants had vanished into thin air. Maritime authorities conducted inquiries and salvage operations, examining logbooks, instruments, and cargo manifests, but found no definitive evidence pointing to piracy, mutiny, or accident as explanations for the sudden disappearance. Reports detail careful inspection of all accessible compartments, with officers confirming that no hidden conflicts or sabotage were apparent. Instruments essential to navigation, including compasses and charts, remained undisturbed, ruling out mismanagement. Salvage attempts adhered to maritime law, yet produced no clues regarding the crew's whereabouts. Even the cargo, including fragile timber and coal, remained properly stowed, leaving the investigation with a void of factual evidence to explain what might have compelled experienced mariners to abandon an otherwise functional and seaworthy vessel. The intact nature of the ship contrasted sharply with the absence of its crew, raising questions about why experienced seafarers would abandon a vessel fully capable of completing its voyage. Historians have proposed hypotheses ranging from sudden illness to environmental hazards like toxic gas from the cargo, yet none were substantiated by contemporary accounts. Each theory struggled to reconcile the meticulous condition of the vessel with the human absence. No eyewitness testimony corroborated any extraordinary event. The contradiction between preparation, experience, and disappearance continues to challenge conventional logic, leaving the Resolute as a case study in maritime anomalies where tangible facts exist, but human action remains unexplained. Historical records preserved the story of the Resolute as a cautionary example in maritime chronicles, emphasizing the perplexing intersection of human skill, preparation, and inexplicable vanishing at sea. Journals, newspapers, and later scholarly publications referenced the vessel as emblematic of a mystery rooted in absence rather than destruction. In each account, the same details emerge: a seaworthy hull, attentive crew, and intact cargo juxtaposed with a sudden, complete disappearance. The Resolute became a symbol for the limits of human understanding at sea, representing the vulnerability of even the most prepared crews when confronted by forces or choices beyond comprehension. Scholars continue to revisit accounts, reconstructing routes and conditions, yet no hypothesis fully accounts for the crew's disappearance or the vessel's silent preservation, leaving its story unresolved within nautical history. Models of drift, weather logs, and ocean current analyses provide insight into where the ship travelled, but fail to clarify why its crew abandoned it. Archival research reveals no further correspondence or sightings of the missing mariners. The absence of evidence has fostered speculation, but historical rigour confines conclusions to what is verifiable. A ship operating efficiently and a crew inexplicably absent, a paradox that endures across generations. Whatever human or environmental factor caused the Resolute's abandonment, it remains a case where preparation, skill, and maritime prudence collided with mystery, leaving a gap in understanding that history cannot close. Despite exhaustive documentation of its construction, crew, and voyage, the disappearance continues to defy explanation. Each attempt to reconstruct events highlights the ship's competence and readiness, yet fails to account for the human element. Maritime experts repeatedly return to the same question. How could a vessel capable of completing its journey become a silent witness to absence rather than evidence? The Resolute floats through forgotten eras, a vessel whose empty deckboards whisper of choices never explained and destinies never returned. The Florence H. The waters of the North Atlantic have long carried whispered tales of vessels found drifting without a soul aboard. But few modern cases stir both maritime professionals and mystery seekers like that of the MV Lyubov Orlova, a Soviet-built cruise ship that became one of the most notorious uncrewed ships in recent memory. Launched in 1976 and named after a celebrated Soviet actress, the Lyubov Orlova spent much of her early life carrying passengers through northern waters under various state-sponsored tours before changes in political and economic tides left her far from her original purpose. After her retirement in the early 1990s, the vessel passed through a succession of private owners, her condition steadily declining as she sat largely idle in ports in Canada and the Caribbean. Ultimately laid up and falling into disrepair, she was sold in 2010 to be towed from Newfoundland to the Dominican Republic, where her new owners said she would be scrapped. During that ill-fated tow, the Lyubov Orlova broke free of her tuglines in the North Atlantic, leaving behind only the echo of metal against sea and sky as she drifted into open waters, unmoored by human hands. Once adrift, the ship became a subject of concern for maritime authorities and seafarers alike, not because of any signals from aboard, but because of what her empty, drifting hull represented. Without an active crew, the vessel posed a navigational hazard, but carried no official distress beacon or communication device to inform shipping traffic of her course, rendering her presence on the vast ocean both silent and unpredictable. Mariners who crossed her path reported seeing a once proud liner moving steadily with the ocean's currents, a lonely silhouette against the horizon that seemed to defy ordinary explanation. Despite repeated efforts to locate and intercept her, the Lyubov Orlova vanished from radar and sight, becoming something of a phantom to those who had hoped to chart her course or salvage her before storm or sea ice could claim her. Official records from the time of her disappearance remain sparse, a testament to the bewildering nature of a large ship simply slipping beyond the reach of every attempt to secure, tow, or track her. Her last known position was logged somewhere in the North Atlantic, far from her intended destination and far from any crew who might have attempted to guide her. Stories circulated among sailors and in maritime forums of sightings that could or could not have been the Lyubov Orlova, each account adding layers to her mystique. Some claim to have seen her silhouette on misty mornings, her portholes vacant as she cut through the grey seas without the glint of human life, while others insisted that such sightings were misidentifications of other derelict craft or illusions born of long hours at sea. These conflicting reports only deepened the sense that something about the vessel's disappearance had slipped beyond the normal bounds of nautical explanation. Maritime analysts offered mundane possibilities to account for the lack of confirmed encounters, that the ship had sunk quietly beneath the waves, collapsed under her own weight, or been dashed against rocky shoals far from shipping lanes. Yet no wreckage definitively identified as the Lyubov Orlova has ever been found, and the very absence of physical evidence gave rise to speculation that she might still drift in some remote expanse of ocean carried by currents and storms alike, untouched by human discovery. Her ghostly reputation grew from the tension between these professional assessments and the persistent rumours that she had not yet met a final resting place. Within the larger context of ghost ships, vessels found abandoned or uncrewed and still afloat represent a rare but chilling category of maritime mystery. The famous Mary Celeste of the 19th century remains the most enduring example, her intact cargo and absent crew baffling investigators for generations. But the Lyubov Orlova's modern iteration of that enigma carried with it unanswered questions about technology, abandonment, and the limits of human tracking in remote waters. Even with global positioning systems and satellite monitoring, a ship could still slip into obscurity, reminding the world that the sea does not yield all its movements to charts and signals. Today, the Lyubov Orlova occupies a place in both maritime cautionary tales and in the lore of ghost ships that continue to fascinate those who study or traverse the oceans. Her disappearance highlighted the perils of towing large, uncrewed vessels across volatile waters, and prompted discussions in shipping and regulatory circles about protocols for derelict craft that might endanger others. Yet even procedural debates carry an undercurrent of eerie wonder when tied to a ship that simply vanished from human reach. The sense of unresolved tension around the Lyubov Orlova stems not merely from her abandonment but from the human need for closure, for knowing what happened to those responsible for her final journey. In many ghost ship cases, there is at least a theory that gains traction, a converging line of evidence that allows historians to say with measured confidence what likely occurred. With the Lyubov Orlova, the lack of definitive closure only amplifies the haunting image of a silent ship drifting across a restless sea, her decks empty of life yet somehow full of unanswered questions. Though factual records confirm her construction, her troubled final voyage, and her disappearance from towed custody in the North Atlantic, everything beyond that resists tidy explanation. No distress call, no recovered lifeboats, no logged encounters that could place her conclusively on any chart after she broke free. The Atlantic is vast, capable of swallowing both ship and story, and in the case of the Lyubov Orlova, it remains impossible to say whether she lies at the bottom of deep waters or continues to drift where few eyes can see her. Even now, decades after her last documented sighting, sailors crossing wide ocean swells cannot entirely dismiss the possibility that a silhouette on the distant horizon might be her. Her empty corridors echo with the Gulf wind and the creak of wood and steel. The vessel stands as a ghostly testament to the enduring mystery of the sea. The lonely silhouette of the MV Lyubov Orlova may still roam the endless ocean, an uncrewed ship whose final fate remains lost somewhere between horizon and abyss. The Jian Seng. Authorities in 2006 were confronted with a maritime puzzle unlike any typical vessel recovery when the Jian Seng was found adrift off northeastern Australia. The ship appeared battered yet intact, every sign of human presence mysteriously absent. Observers noted torn ropes and damaged rigging, while inside machinery hummed silently and supplies remained undisturbed. Standard safety protocols were executed, yet the scene offered no clues about the fate of the crew. For the professionals tasked with investigation, the vessel presented a quiet, unnerving challenge. A modern ship, fully functional in its systems, carrying the ghost of a crew that seemed to have vanished without explanation. Inspection revealed a hull scarred by forces no one could definitively identify, with jagged metal, torn nets and splintered wood hinting at sudden impact or catastrophe. Inside, however, the scene contradicted any sense of disaster. Cabins remained organised, navigational tools untouched, and personal effects were in place, suggesting the absence of struggle or panic. The stark dissonance between the damage outside and the calm within created a sense of unease among investigators. Each observation deepened the mystery, forcing them to confront the possibility that whatever had befallen the crew might have occurred with terrifying swiftness, leaving the vessel physically altered but internally unchanged. The location of the Jian Seng heightened the perplexity. Found near the remote stretch of the Coral Sea, far from major shipping lanes, the vessel's surroundings were isolated, with sparse human activity and little monitoring infrastructure. Local currents shifted unpredictably, and weather data from the day offered no clear evidence of storms severe enough to explain the ship's condition. The isolation magnified questions about timing and opportunity. Had the crew abandoned the vessel willingly, or had some unforeseen event removed them entirely? The setting painted a tableau of a ship stranded between human expectation and the vast, indifferent ocean. Officials in maritime affairs conducted detailed investigations, documenting every anomaly with meticulous care. Broken panels, bent railings, and damaged lifeboat stations were catalogued, yet every recorded observation deepened the uncertainty. No logs or emergency messages were recovered, and the ship's operational equipment indicated normal function up until discovery. Even communications devices offered no clues, and investigators could only confirm the absence of the 3 crew members. The thoroughness of official records underscored the frustration. A vessel could be perfectly documented, yet entirely inexplicable in its human absence. The 3-man crew was seasoned fishermen, familiar with the regional hazards and the routine challenges of operating such a vessel. Their expertise made the disappearance all the more confounding, as experienced sailors would have known how to respond to storms, equipment failure, or any sudden emergency. No personal belongings were missing. no lifeboats had been deployed, and no distress signals were triggered. This juxtaposition of professional skill and total absence created an enduring tension. How could such experienced individuals simply vanish, leaving a working vessel behind in a state that suggested nothing untoward had occurred internally? Investigators considered every reasonable explanation that could be reconciled with the visible evidence. Sudden accidents, violent weather, rogue waves, or even piracy were examined, yet each theory fell short when matched to the documented condition of the ship. Structural damage suggested impact, but no wreckage or external object could be identified as the cause. Nothing about the interior indicated a struggle, illness, or evacuation. The absence of a definitive cause lent a surreal quality to the investigation, as the vessel seemed to exist outside conventional understanding of maritime accidents and human behaviour at sea. While abandoned ships are not uncommon in maritime history, the Jian Seng's case was remarkable for its modern context and apparent order amidst visible damage. Unlike historical ghost ships, where age and decay might suggest abandonment, this vessel was relatively new and fully functional. Comparisons to similar cases emphasized her anomaly, modern construction, documented distress without evidence, and total disappearance of human operators. In the context of contemporary maritime operations, her story became a benchmark of unexplained occurrences, a reference point for ghost ship discussions and forensic investigations alike. Specialists in oceanography and maritime navigation analysed currents, wind patterns, and drift trajectories in hopes of tracing her course and determining where the crew might have gone. Yet no calculations produced a consistent result, and the vessel's apparent path suggested randomness, as if guided by unseen forces rather than predictable environmental factors. Technical observation provided only partial answers and raised new questions. How had she arrived at her discovered location, and why had human hands not remained aboard to adjust her course? Each layer of analysis reinforced the enigma, leaving experts with more hypotheses than certainty. Conflicting reports added to the tension surrounding the case. Passing commercial vessels reported seeing a similar ship at different coordinates days after the official discovery, yet verification was impossible. Unconfirmed sightings and anecdotal accounts circulated among local fishermen and shipping crews, each story slightly different from the last. Media coverage amplified speculation, and online forums buzzed with debate, contrasting first-hand reports with conjecture. Every conflicting account deepened the mystery, suggesting that the Jian Seng's trajectory and human absence might remain permanently unresolved, while leaving open the possibility that the vessel had interacted with observers without explanation. Public fascination grew quickly. News articles highlighted the ship's mysterious status, while maritime enthusiasts debated her fate online. Comparisons to historical ghost ships were inevitable, yet the Jian Seng's modern timeline gave her a unique resonance. She represented not only a maritime anomaly, but also a case study in uncertainty within regulated, highly monitored waters. Discussions in forums and maritime circles oscillated between rational inquiry and eerie speculation, yet the persistent theme was the same: a fully operational ship, visibly damaged, completely uncrewed, drifting in a vast expanse where answers remained tantalizingly out of reach. Even after extensive investigation, the vessel's story remained suspended between fact and speculation. Documentation confirms her discovery, damage, and total lack of crew, yet no conclusive evidence explains how or why the sailors disappeared. Maritime authorities have closed inquiries without answers, and her current fate is unknown. The Jian Seng continues to occupy a place in modern ghost ship lore, an unsettling example of how a ship can appear functional yet devoid of life. Her story underscores the limits of human control over the sea and the mysteries that persist despite modern technology and vigilant monitoring. The Jian Seng endures as a silent enigma, a vessel that drifted beyond explanation and continues to haunt the imagination of those who study the sea. The SS Cotopaxi. In the chill of late autumn 1925, the SS Cotopaxi embarked on what should have been a routine coal shipment, a voyage that would vanish into the Atlantic without a trace. Departing from Charleston, South Carolina, she carried a full load of coal bound for Havana, with 32 men aboard tasked with the delivery. Early reports describe her leaving port under calm skies, the crew confident and the vessel seaworthy. Within days, however, communications ceased, and the ship faded from maritime records, leaving only a lingering question. How could a fully functional ship, navigated by experienced hands, disappear without explanation? Constructed just after World War I, the Cotopaxi was designed for durability and reliability. Her steel hull measured over 250 feet in length, and her reinforced cargo holds were capable of transporting thousands of tons of coal. The ship represented the industrial ambitions of the early 20th century, a link in the chain of transatlantic trade that connected ports along the eastern seaboard to the Caribbean. Despite her robustness, conditions at sea were always unpredictable, and every voyage carried inherent risk. Yet no structural faults were documented, making her disappearance all the more confounding to those who studied her fate in the decades to come. Charleston harbour logs recorded her departure meticulously, noting cargo weight, crew manifest, and her intended course toward Havana. The 32 crew members were experienced sailors, accustomed to the rigours of ocean navigation and the challenges of early 20th century maritime trade. Observers noted nothing unusual in her departure. The ship slipped from the harbour with steady progress, the crew attending to routine tasks. It would be her last confirmed movement, and in retrospect, the meticulous records of her exit offered an ironic contrast to the mystery that would envelop her final voyage. November weather along the Atlantic was notoriously capricious, and the Cotopaxi was not immune to its effects. Reports from the period indicate gusty winds and rolling swells, though no severe storms were officially recorded along her intended path. Mariners at the time relied heavily on experience and charts, rather than sophisticated forecasting, leaving even seasoned crews vulnerable to sudden shifts in weather. While environmental conditions alone could not fully explain her disappearance, they remain a plausible factor considered by investigators, illustrating the precarious nature of maritime travel during the era. Radio communications from the Cotopaxi ended abruptly after a brief exchange with coastal stations. The messages were routine, noting her progress and position, but there was no warning of mechanical failure, danger, or distress. The sudden silence left authorities with only the last known coordinates and the disquieting implication that whatever occurred happened quickly and without recorded warning. This abrupt cessation of contact became the first tangible sign of the vessel's mysterious fate, sparking concern along the eastern seaboard and prompting one of the most extensive search efforts in regional maritime history. Search operations began immediately, with Coast Guard patrols and nearby vessels combing the Atlantic for any sign of the missing ship. Initial theories ranged from capsizing due to rogue waves to collision with submerged objects or mechanical failure. Despite extensive canvassing, no wreckage, debris, or survivors were recovered. The absence of evidence deepened the mystery, leaving investigators to consider scenarios that would allow a large, seaworthy ship to vanish almost entirely. Each failed search only compounded the sense that the Cotopaxi had slipped through both the ocean and the record books, leaving questions that would endure for decades. Years later, reports of unidentified drifting wrecks surfaced along the Caribbean and Atlantic coasts, prompting speculation that one of these could have been the Cotopaxi. Photographs and testimonies from local mariners were inconclusive, and no wreck could be definitively linked to the vessel. The fragmentary nature of these sightings created a tension between hope for closure and the enduring impossibility of verification. Even in the absence of concrete evidence, the mere possibility that the Cotopaxi survived beyond her last confirmed position contributed to the haunting aura surrounding her disappearance. The Cotopaxi's story eventually became woven into broader maritime lore, particularly as discussions of the Bermuda Triangle began to emerge in the mid-20th century. While there is no direct evidence connecting her disappearance to the Triangle's later myths, the ship is frequently cited in historical examinations of early 20th century maritime losses in the Western Atlantic. Her case exemplifies the hazards of the era, routine voyages that could suddenly transform into inexplicable mysteries, leaving no survivors, no accounts, and only traces of a ship that once bridged ports and economies. The human aspect of the story is equally compelling. 32 crew members vanished with the ship, their fates unknown. Families awaited news that never came, while shipping companies and local authorities confronted the practical and emotional consequences of a vessel gone missing. Diaries, letters, and port records provide glimpses into their lives, yet none can illuminate the circumstances that led to the ship's disappearance. Their absence underscores the enduring human cost behind maritime mysteries and the way the sea can erase not just vessels, but the stories of those who sailed them. Modern research has revisited archival logs, shipping manifests, and oceanographic data to piece together the Cotopaxi's possible trajectory. Scholars and amateur historians alike have sought links between unverified wrecks and her final voyage, analysing drift patterns, currents, and potential hazards along her route. Despite these efforts, the evidence remains inconclusive, and no definitive identification has been made. The Cotopaxi persists as both a historical case study and a symbol of unresolved maritime mystery, a vessel whose disappearance continues to challenge experts and captivate those drawn to the enigma of the sea. Even a century later, the Cotopaxi continues to intrigue historians and seafarers. Her disappearance demonstrates the limits of early 20th century navigation and highlights the unpredictable forces of the Atlantic. The combination of meticulous departure records, sudden loss of contact, and absence of physical evidence creates a narrative that is both documented and unknowable. The story of the Cotopaxi bridges history and mystery, reminding observers that the sea often preserves its secrets long after those who sought them are gone. Each inquiry into her fate reveals the enduring tension between documented fact and the ocean's quiet inscrutability. Somewhere beneath the Atlantic's restless currents, the SS Cotopaxi lies silently, a century-old enigma that refuses to reveal its secrets. The Rosabel. A routine fishing expedition turned inexplicably sinister when the Rosabel was discovered adrift in the North Sea, and her crew vanished without a trace. Observers approaching the vessel noted the absence of any signs of struggle, the ship's deck tidy and undisturbed, nets neatly coiled and supplies still in place. There were no signs of collision or damage, leaving investigators with the unnerving realization that the crew had somehow disappeared entirely. For maritime authorities, the discovery presented a scenario that defied explanation. A fully operational trawler, seaworthy in appearance, yet entirely devoid of human presence. The vessel, a sturdy British trawler built for coastal fisheries, had long been a reliable presence among northern ports. Measuring just over 120 feet in length, with a reinforced hull designed to withstand harsh North Sea conditions, she carried sufficient supplies for weeks at sea. Her crew was composed of experienced fishermen, familiar with the unpredictable waters of the region. Routine inspections and maintenance logs confirm that the Rosabel had been well cared for, making her abandonment all the more perplexing. Every element of the vessel suggested readiness for an ordinary voyage, yet her sudden emptiness contradicted the reliability that her construction and crew normally ensured. Harbour logs indicate she left port with a full complement of crew and well-stocked provisions, embarking on what was expected to be a short fishing trip. Weather reports from the day suggested manageable conditions, with only a mild northwest wind disturbing the waves. Crew members were documented attending to standard preparations, including securing nets, checking rigging, and inspecting the hull. Local fishermen remember seeing her depart, routine in appearance and under control. Within days, however, no further communication arrived, and the trawler had vanished from all observation, leaving only unanswered questions regarding the fate of its skilled sailors and their intended catch. That region of the North Sea is notorious for sudden storms, dense fog, and unpredictable tides, conditions capable of overwhelming even seasoned sailors. Strong currents can shift quickly, and coastal sandbanks pose a persistent hazard to navigation. Historical records indicate November weather often brought low visibility and abrupt gales, creating situations where even minor errors could become deadly. Yet the Rosabel's discovery showed no indication of grounding or capsizing, and no storm damage was evident. The environment remained a plausible but incomplete factor, highlighting the way natural conditions could create opportunity for disaster, while failing to explain the total disappearance of a trained crew. When the Rosabel was later found by a passing vessel, lifeboats were missing and cabins were perfectly arranged, as if the crew had simply stepped away. Galley equipment was clean and tools remained at their workstations, suggesting no sudden evacuation or panic. The eerie calm stood in sharp contrast to the absence of human life, and investigators struggled to reconcile the trawler's orderly interior with the violent unpredictability of the North Sea. The scene presented an image of abandonment that was intentional or instantaneous, but neither theory fit comfortably with the practical realities of early 20th century fishing life. Those responsible for maritime oversight and nearby ships documented every anomaly, forming initial hypotheses to explain the mystery. Suggestions ranged from accidental capsizing in concealed waters, a sudden onboard emergency, or even encounters with other ships or unusual sea phenomena. Nothing found during the inspection supported any particular theory definitively. The lack of physical evidence forced investigators to rely on circumstantial observations, the intact hull, absence of bodies, and missing lifeboats. The Rosabel's disappearance became an early 20th century conundrum, defying simple explanation and challenging the understanding of even the most experienced maritime professionals familiar with North Sea conditions. The men aboard were widely respected within local ports, experienced in fishing and coastal navigation, accustomed to the rigorous schedule and hazards of their trade. Many had sailed together for years, forming an efficient team capable of responding to sudden shifts in weather or mechanical difficulties. The disappearance of such competent sailors suggested extraordinary circumstances, further deepening the enigma. Their absence was noted not only in maritime records, but in letters and accounts from families and colleagues who awaited news that never came. The human dimension emphasized the stark reality of the mystery. 32 lives abruptly erased from both vessel and record. Detailed inspection revealed that all navigational instruments were operational, nets and fishing equipment were stowed properly, and the ship's supply stores were untouched. There was no evidence of a struggle, illness, or sabotage, and every aspect of the vessel indicated that life aboard should have continued as normal. This internal order contrasted sharply with the unexplained absence of the crew, leaving investigators to confront the unnerving possibility that the disappearance had occurred under circumstances wholly undetectable from the trawler itself. Each observation added to the chilling sense that the ship had simply been emptied by forces beyond understanding. The North Sea had long been a stage for sudden disappearances and maritime accidents, yet the Rosabel stood out as a particularly perplexing case. Records from similar vessels note that most incidents involved storm damage, grounding, or other physical causes, while this trawler presented none. Historians highlight the case when discussing early 20th century fishing practices and the hazards inherent to northern waters, emphasizing the vessel's anomaly in contrast to more typical losses. The Rosabel's story is cited as evidence that even routine, well-documented voyages can end in complete and inexplicable disappearance, leaving observers to speculate across generations. Local folklore quickly incorporated the story, with sailors whispering of ghostly trawlers and the North Sea's mysterious currents, although historians stress that these accounts are anecdotal. Reports suggest that subsequent fishermen occasionally believed they glimpsed the vessel far from its known route, but verification proved impossible. The legend of the Rosabel blends factual documentation with human imagination, illustrating how maritime mysteries persist in culture as well as in records. This blending of evidence and folklore underscores the enduring fascination with ships that vanish inexplicably, capturing both the technical and emotional aspects of unexplained loss at sea. In spite of more than 100 years of maritime records and investigative efforts, the fate of the Rosabel's crew remains unresolved. The ship's discovery without a crew, lifeboats missing and cabins intact continues to baffle historians and maritime enthusiasts alike. Her story illustrates the unpredictability of the North Sea and the fragile line between routine voyages and inexplicable disappearance. The trawler remains a reminder that even experienced sailors in well-maintained vessels are not immune to the ocean's mysteries, and that the combination of environment, circumstance, and chance can render even the most controlled journey unknowable. Suspended between memory and imagination, the Rosabel drifts eternally, a vessel whose empty decks continue to stir questions that the North Sea refuses to answer. The Ellen Austin's prize ship. On a calm stretch of the Atlantic, the Ellen Austin encountered a vessel that seemed to drift out of history itself, empty of crew yet laden with cargo. The derelict appeared at first glance to be a standard merchant vessel, but its lifeless decks and silent rigging immediately drew the curiosity of the crew. No signs of recent activity could be discerned, and yet the ship remained seaworthy, floating as though guided by unseen hands. Boarding parties approached cautiously, aware that the open ocean often concealed dangers, yet nothing in their experience could explain why the ship was abandoned while fully capable of movement. The Ellen Austin, a sturdy merchant ship of the late 19th century, plied transatlantic trade routes with a reputation for reliability and an experienced crew accustomed to the vagaries of the Atlantic. Her voyages often involved transporting goods and occasionally capturing prize ships during periods of maritime conflict or salvage operations, making her crew familiar with irregular and unexpected encounters at sea. Records show the Ellen Austin was well maintained, with sails and rigging inspected before departure, navigational charts accurate, and her officers versed in maritime protocol. The encounter with the abandoned vessel would test both their training and their sense of rationality, as the situation defied standard procedure. Sailors first sighted the prize ship with sails limp and decks eerily silent, its hull carrying the weight of cargo but none of the human activity that should have animated it. The derelict's appearance was unremarkable except for the haunting emptiness, the ship's structure intact, lines taut and rudder seemingly functional. Crew members aboard the Ellen Austin described a sense of stillness that felt unnatural, a quiet so profound that even the wind seemed to pause in its passage. As the ship drifted closer, officers noted that the deck fittings were clean and the hatches secure, suggesting the vessel had been left in order, yet no one remained to guide her. The boarding party approached cautiously, hoping to bring the derelict safely under tow, yet the vessel seemed almost alive in its subtle resistance to control. Lines cast from the Ellen Austin occasionally slackened without apparent reason, and attempts to adjust sails met unexpected tension. Crew members reported a sensation of imbalance or movement that could not be accounted for by current or wind. Despite these anomalies, the officers maintained discipline and methodically attempted to secure the ship. Each effort, however, ended with increasing unease, as though the vessel itself opposed the imposition of human authority while remaining physically unharmed. Experienced seamen found themselves unnerved, their confidence tempered by inexplicable occurrences aboard the ship, as though the ocean itself conspired to deny them command. Many noted strange sounds echoing below decks, creaks and groans that aligned with no discernible mechanical cause. Officers began questioning the prudence of remaining aboard or committing more men to the prize, aware that their own discipline might not suffice against circumstances they could not define. The psychological tension aboard the Ellen Austin grew, a subtle but undeniable weight pressing on every decision, magnifying the mystery and prompting careful observation of even the smallest detail. Repeated efforts to man the prize were thwarted mysteriously, with replacement crews vanishing or fleeing, leaving the ship to drift once more in the Atlantic's vast solitude. Logs record that after each attempt, the vessel would slip from control in ways not explained by tide, current, or wind. Some accounts suggest that men were unable to remain aboard for more than a few hours without experiencing disorientation or fear so profound that they abandoned their posts. No crewman was harmed physically, yet the pattern of retreat repeated itself with such consistency that the ship earned a reputation for resisting human command entirely. Strong currents, shifting winds, and hidden shoals posed real dangers, yet the consistency of the ship's abandonment suggested something beyond ordinary maritime risk. Navigational charts indicated no unusual hazards in the area at the time, and yet the phenomenon repeated regardless of weather or proximity to coastlines. Historians reviewing the accounts have noted that while natural forces could explain sporadic difficulty in handling a vessel, they cannot fully account for the repeated inability of crews to maintain control. This paradox between the ship's physical integrity and its resistance to human management became the central puzzle of the Ellen Austin's prize. Official logs recorded every attempt to secure the ship, providing a rare glimpse into maritime operations of the era, yet each document only deepened the enigma surrounding its behaviour. Entries detail precise times, positions, weather conditions, and crew actions, emphasizing methodical efforts to establish control. Despite this rigor, none of the records could rationalize why men left a fully operational vessel unattended, nor why it consistently eluded safe navigation toward port. The combination of careful documentation and inexplicable outcomes created a case study in maritime uncertainty, capturing the attention of historians and seafarers for generations. Fear and superstition began to take hold among sailors, whose repeated failures aboard the vessel left lasting impressions of helplessness against forces neither seen nor understood. Some crew members later reported uneasy feelings, believing the ship itself bore a will or presence, though such claims remained anecdotal. This psychological impact underscores how extraordinary maritime events affect perception, blending tangible evidence with human interpretation. The story of the Ellen Austin's prize illustrates the intersection of human endeavour and uncontrollable environment, demonstrating how even disciplined sailors can confront situations that challenge both rationality and courage. The prize ship became a legend, its story woven into maritime folklore, cautionary tales, and reports that blurred the line between fact and ghostly imagination. Over time, accounts of the vessel circulated widely among sailors, reinforcing its reputation as a mysterious and potentially cursed ship. Folklore exaggerated elements of the repeated abandonment, yet historical records confirm that at least some attempts to control her ended in genuine confusion and failure. This blending of documented events and myth contributes to the ship's enduring aura, making it a symbol of the Atlantic's persistent and enigmatic power. Historians continue to cite the Ellen Austin's prize ship as one of the most perplexing cases of a vessel defying human control, an enduring testament to the ocean's unpredictable power. The repeated attempts, meticulous logs, and consistent inability to secure the derelict create a narrative that challenges both logic and experience. Contemporary maritime scholars regard the incident as a unique intersection of human effort and the sea's indifference, a case where even competence and preparation proved insufficient. The prize ship story remains a compelling example of how the Atlantic has long harboured enigmas that resist explanation, leaving those who study them in awe of their enduring mystery. Despite every documented attempt to claim it, the prize ship remains an enigma, a ghostly echo of the Atlantic's unwillingness to be tamed. The Angeline. The Angeline was first reported by a nearby ferry captain, who found her anchored oddly in open water, her deckboards immaculate and entirely devoid of human presence. At first glance, the schooner appeared as any routine vessel traversing Lake Michigan, yet closer inspection revealed the unsettling absence of her crew. Hammocks swayed lightly, tools remained in place, and provisions were untouched, as if the sailors had vanished mid-task. The ferry captain's initial report prompted curiosity and concern, drawing other vessels to examine the anomaly. Despite thorough observation, no immediate explanation emerged, and the ship's emptiness felt deliberate, almost purposeful against the calm lake waters. Her hull, reinforced for the Great Lakes' unpredictable currents, and twin masts spoke to mid-19th century craftsmanship, designed for both speed and cargo capacity. The Angeline was constructed to handle sudden storms and hidden shoals, her frame tested in commercial service before the mysterious voyage. Every detail, from the polished woodwork of the decks to the taut rigging, suggested a vessel maintained meticulously for operational reliability. Such attention to function and form emphasized the paradox: a ship perfectly capable of hosting a crew, yet empty when discovered. Its presence on the lake was a testament both to craftsmanship and the strange absence that would haunt those who saw it. Documents confirm she departed port with a competent crew and a modest cargo of goods, destined for a routine coastal delivery. Records list sailors experienced in navigating the lake's treacherous channels, capable of adjusting sails to sudden shifts in wind or tide. The cargo consisted of barrels, crates, and trade goods, all secured for stability during transit. Nothing in the official documentation suggested a reason for sudden abandonment or disappearance. The planned journey was short and well within the abilities of both ship and crew, underscoring the enigma when she was later found unattended, her cargo intact and her decks orderly. Investigators who boarded noted everything in precise order: hammocks neatly hung, tools in place, and provisions untouched, as if her crew had stepped off for a moment and never returned. No signs of struggle, fire, or collision were evident, and the ship's cabins remained meticulously arranged. The steering mechanism was set correctly, sails properly stowed, and no logs indicated distress. Observers recorded a sense of eerie stillness, a silence that contrasted with the lake's usual murmur of wind and water. Even small details, ropes coiled neatly, anchor lines secured, hinted at a sudden departure or disappearance under circumstances that left no trace or warning, deepening the mystery for all who examined her. Despite the lake's reputation for sudden storms, conditions at the time were mild, with no evidence of wind, waves, or ice that could explain the crew's absence. Historical weather records confirm that the day of discovery offered calm waters and clear skies, with currents flowing at a normal pace. There were no reports of accidents, collisions, or natural events that could have forced an evacuation. The Angeline appeared untouched, floating silently as though guided by careful hands, yet those hands were nowhere to be found. The environmental calm juxtaposed with human absence intensified the mystery, leaving observers unsettled and prompting speculation about events hidden from record. Each sailor aboard the Angeline was experienced, accustomed to navigating the lake's hidden shoals and shifting currents, rendering the circumstances of their disappearance all the more inexplicable. Crew lists confirm training in both seamanship and cargo handling, and records suggest disciplined adherence to safety procedures. There were no reports of dissent, illness, or prior incidents that could indicate voluntary abandonment. Their sudden absence from a vessel fully capable of hosting them remains a paradox, raising questions not only about physical events, but also about decision-making under unknown pressures. The human element amplifies the mystery, as every factor that should have ensured safety does not explain the vanishing. Local authorities and maritime reporters considered misadventure, illness, or even foul play, yet none of these possibilities was supported by physical evidence. The absence of blood, damage, or struggle contradicted theories of violent conflict. An illness severe enough to incapacitate an entire crew simultaneously seemed improbable and left no trace on the ship. Reports of possible foul play lacked corroboration, as no other vessels or witnesses reported suspicious activity in the area. Theories were further complicated by the ship's impeccable order. Nothing had been disturbed, and nothing suggested panic. The collective failure of all rational explanations reinforced the Angeline's reputation as an unresolved enigma. A meticulous survey revealed nothing amiss. Cargo remained stowed, navigational instruments were untouched, and all lines and sails were secured as if awaiting a crew's return. The decks were swept, the cabins clean, and the anchor set correctly. Inspectors found no evidence of tampering, theft, or mechanical failure. Even the smallest details, the placement of barrels, the alignment of hatch covers, suggested deliberate care. The ship's condition contradicted all theories of disaster or hurried departure, emphasizing the puzzle of its abandonment. Each observation added weight to the uncertainty, leaving those who examined her both impressed by her integrity and unnerved by the absence of life. Newspapers from 1860 chronicled the discovery, while shipping logs emphasized both the vessel's sound condition and the baffling absence of her crew, leaving the case unresolved. Local reports recounted the initial sighting, the boarding process, and the impressions of investigators, yet no conclusions were reached. Maritime historians continue to cite these records as some of the most thorough documentation of an otherwise inexplicable disappearance. The combination of precise record-keeping and lack of explanation created a narrative that has endured for generations, ensuring the Angeline's place in Great Lakes folklore as a symbol of mystery and human uncertainty. Over decades, the Angeline became an enduring subject of Great Lakes lore, remembered not for catastrophe, but for the quiet, unexplained vanishing of all aboard. Sailors spoke of her as a silent warning, a ship whose calm and order concealed an unsolvable enigma. Stories circulated about her presence on the lake, each retelling emphasizing both her intact condition and the impossibility of explaining why the crew disappeared. The vessel's quiet majesty and unanswered questions captured the imagination, merging historical fact with a sense of the uncanny. Her legend persists, a reminder of how ordinary voyages can sometimes conceal extraordinary mysteries. The Angeline's tale remains a puzzle, a carefully documented event with no resolution, leaving questions about human absence and the quiet power of the lake unanswered. Historians, mariners, and curious observers continue to revisit the story, drawn to the tension between methodical preparation and sudden, inexplicable disappearance. The lake's waters keep their secrets, and the Angeline's decks, so perfectly arranged, serve as a haunting symbol of what cannot be known. The vessel's story endures not only as fact, but as a meditation on uncertainty, human vulnerability, and the mysteries that quietly persist in even the most familiar waters. Resting on Lake Michigan, the Angeline's empty decks stand as a silent testament to the fate of those who vanished without explanation. The Octavius. Ice fields stretched endlessly, and through a jagged channel the Octavius appeared suspended, her masts rigid and encased in crystalline frost, a frozen ghost against the Arctic horizon. Explorers approaching the vessel reported a surreal stillness, the air around her charged with both awe and unease. The decks were glazed with ice, and no sign of movement or life could be detected. Despite proximity, No cries or signs of struggle were evident. Observers were struck by the paradox, a vessel seemingly intact and seaworthy, yet entirely abandoned or otherwise rendered lifeless, a spectral reminder of the Arctic's unforgiving grip. The merchant vessel's hull, built for long northern voyages, bore evidence of sturdy construction, designed to carry cargo safely through unpredictable waters, reflecting the ingenuity of 18th century shipwrights. Her frame was reinforced to withstand the constant pressure of ice, with fastened beams and tight seams promising durability. The masts were tall and straight, with rigging still taut despite the cold suggesting maintenance before the voyage. Even the anchor, partially frozen in place, indicated deliberate care rather than hasty abandonment. Every structural detail implied a ship prepared for arduous conditions, yet the human element, the crew, was conspicuously absent. Her journey began as routine, with a crew experienced in northern navigation, laden with trade goods bound for distant ports, a voyage expected to yield profit and safe return. Logs list seasoned sailors, familiar with polar routes and the hazards of northern winds, ice and sudden storms. Cargo manifests included barrels and crates, all arranged to maintain stability during transit. There were no indications of unexpected diversion or unusual cargo that might explain an irregular voyage. The crew was capable, the ship capable, and yet somewhere between port and discovery, the Octavius became a vessel of silence, its fate unresolved and chilling in its finality. When explorers finally approached the Octavius, the ship's decks were locked in ice, rigging stiff and unyielding, and interior cabins suggested sudden stillness, with no movement or disturbance to indicate struggle. Tools rested in their places, hammocks hung undisturbed, and provisions remained in neat piles. The captain's quarters were orderly, with no sign of haste or conflict, and the galley appeared untouched. Even minor details, such as the alignment of barrels and coiled ropes, implied a pause frozen in time rather than chaotic abandonment. Observers felt the weight of absence in every corner, as though the Arctic had held its breath, and the crew had vanished into legend. Reports suggest the crew's fate was sealed by the Arctic's relentless cold. Whether preserved within the vessel or lost to drifting ice, yet exact details remain shrouded in conflicting accounts. Some narratives claim the sailors were found frozen at their stations, while others suggest empty cabins and abandoned lifeboats. Witnesses disagreed on whether bodies were ever observed, leading to decades of speculation. The extreme conditions make verification nearly impossible, and the story grew with each retelling. Historians emphasize that the human element, the lives lost or unaccounted for, elevates the Octavius from a mere wreck to a chilling symbol of Arctic peril and enduring uncertainty. Blizzards, shifting flows and polar storms made the region nearly impassable, isolating the ship and preventing any timely rescue. Ice could trap a vessel for weeks or months, and sudden storms could easily claim an unprepared crew. Even explorers approaching the site faced frostbite, freezing winds and disorienting whiteouts. The environment itself seemed complicit in the Octavius's silence, preserving the ship while simultaneously erasing evidence of human fate. The Arctic's frozen expanses amplify the vessel's enigma, leaving observers to wonder how a functional ship and a capable crew could succumb to such invisible forces without leaving tangible clues. Contemporary journals, ship logs, and later retellings present varying narratives of the Octavius, leaving historians uncertain about what truly transpired and reinforcing the vessel's spectral reputation. Accounts from explorers, whalers, and traders often conflict, some claiming frozen bodies aboard, others reporting total abandonment. Sparse documentation and the difficulty of Arctic travel compounded confusion, while embellishments over time blurred fact and legend. Scholars continue to analyze the few surviving records, seeking patterns or corroboration, yet no consensus has been reached. The ship exists in the margins of history, its discovery recorded but its story unresolved, hovering between documentation and myth. Explanations range from navigational error and ice entrapment to supernatural conjecture, but every theory encounters contradictions, leaving the mystery unresolved and fueling enduring speculation. Ice drift could have carried the vessel far from expected routes, yet logs suggest precise navigation before disappearance. Mechanical failure seems unlikely, given the ship's condition upon discovery, and piracy or mutiny is unsupported by evidence. Each hypothesis encounters counterpoints, emphasizing the limits of certainty in extreme environments. The Octavius's fate invites reflection on human vulnerability, the unpredictability of nature, and the enduring allure of mysteries that defy conventional reasoning. Through time, the Octavius became an emblem of Arctic peril, a cautionary tale preserved in maritime folklore, representing both human ambition and the unpredictable threats of frozen seas. Sailors, explorers, and historians reference her story as a reminder that skill and preparation can falter against overwhelming conditions. Tales of the ship evoke both fascination and dread, her ghostly silhouette in ice symbolizing lives lost or erased by nature. The Arctic preserves the vessel while concealing its secrets, a silent archive of human endeavour confronted by isolation and extremes. Its story has persisted, compelling curiosity and speculation for generations. Encased in northern ice and silence, the Octavius remains a spectral testament to human fragility and the unyielding mysteries of the northern seas. The Duke of Danzig. A warm haze hovered over the Indian Ocean as the Duke of Danzig drifted silently, her empty decks swaying gently with the rhythmic motion of distant swells. Passing vessels noted the unusual stillness, the absence of sails billowing in the breeze, and the ship's ghostly tranquility against a vibrant sunlit horizon. Observers were struck by the contradiction. A vessel designed for adventure and conflict, fully intact and seaworthy, yet entirely uncrewed. No sounds of life echoed from below decks, and no signal indicated distress. The Duke of Danzig presented itself as a phantom of the tropics, waiting silently to reveal the fate of those who had last commanded her. Built as a privateer, her hull was reinforced for long voyages and potential skirmishes, with gleaming cannons lined along the sides and ample cargo holds designed for both trade and prize-taking. Her craftsmanship reflected the expertise of early 19th century shipbuilders, with decks sturdy enough to withstand tropical storms and hulls carved for both speed and stability. Even the rigging, still taut despite the weeks adrift, suggested a vessel prepared for disciplined operation. The ship's armament and layout signalled readiness for danger, yet all traces of the men trained to wield it had vanished. Every feature of the Duke of Danzig amplified the tension between preparedness and abandonment. Embarking from a bustling colonial port, the vessel carried an experienced crew and goods destined for faraway markets, a journey planned with precision and expectations of both profit and routine success. Traders and naval officers had noted the ship's departure in official logs, describing competent sailors and a vessel well supplied for months at sea. The planned route crossed open ocean lanes rife with navigational hazards, requiring vigilance and knowledge of wind patterns, reefs, and currents. Despite this preparation, something occurred during the voyage that left the Duke of Danzig drifting unmanned, transforming a routine mission into a historical enigma that would perplex sailors and historians for decades. Merchants passing nearby reported a ship in perfect order yet unmanned, with sails furled neatly and equipment stowed, as though those who operated it had simply vanished without warning. The deck was polished and orderly, ropes coiled meticulously, and no signs of struggle marred the planks. Navigation tools remained in place, charts were secured and provisions were untouched, suggesting that the crew's disappearance was neither chaotic nor hurried. Witnesses described a strange calm, almost theatrical in its precision, as if the vessel itself had frozen time to conceal the human mystery within. The Duke of Danzig appeared as an anomaly against the swaying, restless ocean. Cabins remained undisturbed, hammocks hung empty, and lifeboats floated alongside the vessel, leaving no sign of conflict, panic, or even hurried evacuation from those charged with its navigation. Personal belongings, clothing, and supplies were intact, offering no clues to the crew's departure. Even small details, such as cooking utensils placed neatly or logs resting open on a table, implied an abrupt and unexplained absence. Observers could only speculate on what had prompted the crew to leave a fully functional ship in perfect order, a conundrum that amplified the vessel's reputation as one of the Indian Ocean's enduring maritime mysteries. Tropical currents and unpredictable storms posed constant dangers, yet the Duke of Danzig showed no evidence of struggle against these forces, highlighting the perplexing nature of its abandonment. Seasonal monsoons and sudden squalls could easily capsize an unprepared vessel, yet the ship remained seaworthy and upright, drifting without visible damage. The surrounding waters were dotted with reefs and small islands, any of which could have endangered the crew, yet the ship avoided all hazards. Nature's threats alone seemed insufficient to explain the empty decks, emphasizing the enduring enigma of a capable vessel and trained crew disappearing without a trace in the heart of the Indian Ocean. Colonial records, naval logs, and travellers' journals vary in their reports, some describing minor damage while others insist the ship was immaculate, leaving historians uncertain about the exact circumstances of its desertion. The sparse and contradictory documentation has fueled centuries of debate, with every observer offering a different interpretation of events. Some accounts claim fleeting glimpses of the ship near key trade routes, while others insist it drifted off course before disappearing entirely from records. The discrepancies underscore the difficulty of verifying maritime events in isolated tropical waters, where human oversight and environmental variables can obscure even well-documented voyages. Ideas abound: mutiny, disease, piracy, or sudden evacuation, but no single theory accounts for every known detail, leaving the crew's fate suspended between plausible explanation and enduring enigma. Mutiny seems unlikely given the vessel's orderly condition, while disease would likely have left at least partial evidence in the cabins or galley. Piracy remains uncorroborated, as no attackers were ever documented in the vicinity. Even natural disaster theories falter in light of the ship's intact appearance. Each suggestion exposes a new layer of uncertainty, emphasizing that the Duke of Danzig's mystery is not merely a historical footnote but a puzzle resistant to rational reconstruction. Stories of the Duke of Danzig persist in maritime lore, a cautionary reminder of the ocean's vastness and the unexplained disappearance of sailors who once manned her decks. Sailors tell of its silent drift as a warning and a fascination, a vessel that embodies the unpredictability of long ocean voyages and the human vulnerability to forces both natural and unknown. Its legacy stretches beyond records, preserved in oral accounts, paintings, and the curiosity of historians who continue to wonder how a capable crew and well-maintained privateer could vanish without a trace in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Whatever invisible force swept the crew from the Duke of Danzig, the ship drifts on, a silent witness to a vanishing that no record can explain. The MV Taqing 21. Alarms were raised along the northern Australian coastline when the MV Taqing 21 was spotted, moving slowly under its own power yet devoid of any crew, a modern fishing boat suspended between function and emptiness. Local authorities immediately coordinated with maritime patrols, sending vessels to intercept and inspect the ship. At first glance, the boat appeared entirely operational, the engines running and navigational lights blinking steadily, yet no life signs were detected. Witnesses described the eerie calm, with only the gentle swell rocking the vessel as if it existed in a bubble detached from human presence and explanation. Its hull gleamed under the sun, and advanced navigation systems blinked in silence, while nets, buoys, and crates of fish signalled that the ship had been engaged in active work only hours before being found empty. The deck was meticulously organised, suggesting recent activity rather than neglect, and electronic instruments displayed normal readings. Radar and GPS equipment were fully functional, transmitting location data to satellite networks. Investigators found no evidence of tampering or mechanical failure, a modern mystery in which technology failed to record the crew's vanishing or provide any warning of impending disappearance. Departing from a bustling harbour, the vessel had embarked on a routine tuna fishing trip, manned by experienced sailors who were familiar with local waters, strong currents, and the perils of extended offshore operations. Crew members were trained in navigation, safety, and emergency procedures, making an accidental abandonment less likely. The vessel's manifest included provisions sufficient for weeks at sea, and logs showed no indication of mechanical difficulties or distress calls. The abrupt absence of the crew defied both expectation and maritime procedure, transforming an ordinary fishing voyage into an unresolved enigma of modern nautical history. Observers noted the controls fully operational, radios transmitting only static, and personal effects meticulously arranged on the deck, producing an eerie impression of sudden absence without struggle or chaos. Coffee cups rested on tables, personal clothing lay folded neatly, and navigation charts remained open on consoles. Lifeboats were secured and safety equipment showed no signs of deployment. The juxtaposition of a vessel designed for efficiency and the total disappearance of its human operators challenged standard assumptions, forcing investigators to confront a scenario where professional sailors could vanish without leaving a trace in a contemporary, technologically monitored environment. The cabins were secured, life jackets hung neatly, and meals remained uneaten, leaving investigators puzzled over how an entire crew of 10 could vanish from a small, modern vessel so abruptly. No signs of violence, forced entry, or environmental damage were present. Even minor details, such as logs left open on the bridge or personal items in assigned quarters, suggested the departure was neither panicked nor hurried. Maritime authorities were left with only questions, as the absence of the crew contradicted every principle of standard operating procedure on a vessel designed for constant monitoring and accountability. The surrounding waters are known for sudden squalls, unpredictable currents, and occasional piracy, yet the Taqing 21 showed no signs of damage, emphasizing the baffling contrast between natural hazards and its untouched condition. Satellite imagery confirmed that the vessel had remained in open waters without drifting into reefs or shallow zones. Experts noted that tropical storms can incapacitate crews, yet the ship's intact hull and functioning machinery revealed no struggle or evidence of a violent encounter. The ocean's dangers remained present, but they could not account for the eerie perfection with which the MV Taqing 21 floated, crewless yet fully functional. Analysis of GPS logs and radar data revealed sudden, unexplained course deviations, but neither electronic records nor maritime communications shed light on what had occurred on board. Investigators traced the vessel's path over several days, noting that it veered off its planned route without warning and briefly appeared near shipping lanes before reversing course inexplicably. Communication attempts produced only static, with no distress calls recorded. Even modern surveillance systems were rendered useless against the silent disappearance, leaving gaps in data that only deepened the mystery surrounding a crew that had seemingly evaporated into the open sea. Theories range from mechanical failures and piracy to abrupt crew evacuation, yet none convincingly reconcile the ship's operational state with the complete disappearance of its experienced sailors. Piracy is inconsistent with the lack of damage or theft, while mechanical issues would likely have left traces on instrumentation or prompted distress calls. Sudden evacuation would have required a level of coordination and calm that seems improbable under realistic conditions. Each hypothesis exposes further uncertainty, illustrating that modern vessels and contemporary technology do not guarantee safety from the inexplicable phenomena that continue to haunt open oceans. In contemporary maritime reports, the MV Taqing 21 remains a cautionary tale, a modern ghost ship illustrating that even with advanced technology, the ocean retains secrets that evade explanation. The vessel is cited in safety seminars, maritime publications, and shipping news as a reminder that, despite global tracking, GPS monitoring, and extensive crew training, human absence can occur without precedent. The story of the Taqing 21 bridges the gap between historical ghost ships and the modern era, proving that the sea's mysteries persist across centuries, now cloaked in satellite data, radar blips, and technological oversight. Modern navigation could not safeguard the MV Taqing 21 from the inexplicable, leaving its empty decks as a silent monument to vanished lives and unanswered questions. The SS Waratah. In the bustling harbour of Durban, the SS Waratah prepared to depart, her decks alive with passengers, crew and cargo, none of whom would complete the journey they had begun. Sailors moved briskly, attending to lines and provisions, while families lingered to watch their loved ones board. The air was filled with the scent of coal smoke and salt, mingling with the sounds of whistles and shouted orders. Official records note the ship's manifest, detailing both passengers and cargo destined for Cape Town, yet within days the vessel would vanish, leaving only questions where certainty had been expected. Designed as a modern passenger and cargo liner for her era, the Waratah featured reinforced hulls, spacious cabins, and machinery intended to withstand long voyages across the unpredictable Indian Ocean. At nearly 400 feet in length, she was considered one of the finest vessels of her line, built to carry both people and goods safely. Her twin engines allowed for steady speed, while deckhouses accommodated passengers with the comforts of a small hotel. Maritime engineers of the time regarded her design as innovative, yet despite every precaution, even a ship considered robust could confront forces beyond human control. Documents show she left port on schedule, carrying mail, merchandise, and travellers bound for Cape Town, the promise of routine and reliability masking the mystery that lay ahead. Among the passengers were businessmen, families, and sailors accustomed to long voyages, their expectations rooted in familiarity with the route. The ship's officers maintained standard procedures, charting a course that should have been uneventful. Yet as the Waratah progressed, no subsequent communications confirmed her position, and the tranquility of her departure foreshadowed the troubling absence that would come to define her story. Reports emerged from coastal observers noting her silhouette against the horizon, yet soon conflicting accounts of her position and fate left maritime authorities in confusion. Some claimed she was caught in sudden squalls, while others insisted she had vanished from view entirely, leaving a blank in the records where a ship should have continued its voyage. These contradictory sightings complicated early investigations, forcing officials to reconcile multiple timelines and witness accounts. Each new report raised as many questions as it answered, emphasizing the uncertainty surrounding a vessel whose disappearance would resist definitive explanation. Naval and civilian vessels scoured likely routes for days, finding no trace of the ship, no survivors, and only the faintest rumours of wreckage scattered along the shore. Expeditions combed reefs, inlets, and open waters, guided by drift patterns and prevailing currents, yet nothing conclusively linked to the Waratah was recovered. Investigators considered the possibility of debris sinking rapidly, carried away by the Indian Ocean's relentless currents. But even this offered little comfort in accounting for the complete absence of passengers or crew. The search efforts, though extensive, highlighted the vastness of the ocean and the fragility of human expectation in the face of its mysteries. Speculation ranged from sudden storms to structural failure or navigational error, yet none of these theories could fully account for a vessel disappearing without a trace. Storm records of the period indicate no extraordinary weather at the presumed time of loss, and structural assessments performed before departure confirmed seaworthiness. Navigational errors were possible but improbable, given the experienced crew. Despite careful analysis, the Waratah's fate resisted classification, and historians were left with a vessel that had seemingly evaporated from the face of the ocean, leaving a conundrum that blurred the line between misfortune and enigma. Early 20th century navigation relied on celestial calculations and limited radio communication, leaving captains dependent on skill and chance to avoid hazards that could strike without warning. Charts were imperfect and landmarks were scarce in the vast stretches of open water, forcing reliance on dead reckoning and observation. The Waratah's officers were trained and diligent, yet the limitations of technology made total awareness impossible. These constraints remind us that even seemingly routine voyages could carry immense risk, and that the absence of a ship or its crew need not reflect negligence, but rather the sheer unpredictability of life at sea. The Waratah's disappearance became a source of fascination and caution, influencing shipping practices and embedding her legend into maritime folklore as Australia's own mystery. Newspapers of the time printed speculative accounts, dramatising sightings and theories, while maritime safety regulations evolved to address risks revealed by such losses. Her story permeated public imagination, a cautionary tale for travellers and seafarers alike, highlighting that even the most modern and celebrated ships could vanish without warning. Over time, the Waratah assumed a symbolic presence, representing both the dangers of ocean travel and the human desire to find explanations where none may exist. Even today, maritime historians debate the ship's final resting place, her fate continuing to inspire speculation and intrigue among experts and enthusiasts alike. Expeditions in later decades have sought the wreck with sonar and deep-sea technology, yet the precise location remains undiscovered. Artifacts purportedly linked to the Waratah have surfaced sporadically, but none have been definitively verified, sustaining the narrative of a vanished liner whose passengers were never accounted for. The mystery endures, reminding us that history can preserve stories of disappearance even when the material evidence is lost to time. Lost to time yet never forgotten, the SS Waratah endures as a monument to vanished lives and unanswered questions, her story preserved in whispers of the past and the shadow of unexplored horizons.